welcome to this hearing. This is a meeting of Kensington Chelsea's licensing subcommittee. Thank you for attending. The attendance sheet is up on the screen. I am Councillor Dory Schmetterling and I'll be chairing this meeting. I do not have any interest to declare otherwise, but I would like to mention that I noted from the circulated attendance list the presence of the chairs of two of the local conservation societies, the Pembridge Association and the Ladbroke Association. The latter is Sophia Lambert and the former is Fiona Fleming-Brown. I do know them both quite well, and I've been a member of their organisations for a long time. However, I would emphasise that I've not discussed the case with them, either of them or the associations, and indeed I didn't know they would be attending until I saw the attendance list yesterday. The committee for this hearing comprises Councillor Williams and Councillor Healy and myself. Members, can I please ask you to introduce yourselves and advise whether you have any declarations of interest to make?
I'm Councillor Charles Williams, Councillor for Redcliffe Ward, and I have no interest to declare in this case.
Councillor Healy.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Pat Healy. I represent Dalgarno Ward. And I have no interest to declare in this hearing.
Thank you. This meeting is being held via Microsoft Teams and is being streamed live on YouTube. We are joined by Paul Phelan from the Council's licensing team, our legal officer Heidi Titcombe. Perhaps Mr. Phelan, would you like to say hello? Are you there?
I am, Chair. Good morning, all.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I might as well do this immediately. I think Ms. Titcombe is here.
Good morning, Chair. I'm here.
Thank you. Also with us is our committee officers, Anne Wright. I think we've heard already. Hannah
yes,
Costello.
Good morning, Chairman.
Yeah, and Hannah Koskela, are you there? Okay, Mr. Gareth Ebenezer, are you there?
Yeah, good morning, everybody.
Thank you. And Yasmin Jama?
We have Esme this morning. I'm not Yasmin.
Right. Okay, thank you. Esme Sherry, are you here?
Yes, Chair. President.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hannah Koskela, she's with us, is she not? Yeah, Hannah Koskela?
Yes, she is. Thank you.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Okay, I just wanted to hear it personally. They will be monitoring all of our connections and help with any technical issues we may have. Before we start the formal hearing of this case, we have a few ground rules. Please keep your microphones on mute until you are invited to speak. And please make sure your mobile phones are on silent. And on that note, I'm going to do my own. Right. Please keep your cameras off unless you wish to keep them on. It's not a problem. Keep them on if you like. But if we do become overwhelmed with bandwidth or short of bandwidth, we may ask people who are not speaking to turn their cameras off. And even if you are speaking but have a problem, technical problem, do keep your camera off if you want to. Please note that the Microsoft Teams chat function is not monitored, so please don't use it. Furthermore, this is a public meeting and the chat would not be seen in the live stream. Everyone should have received the procedure for this meeting regarding the use of cameras and how to connect back in if you lose a connection. Thank you. The case before us today is a variation application for Gold Notting Hill, 95 to 97 Portobello Road, W11 2QB. There are a few housekeeping matters to deal with. There's the election of a substitute chair. The quorum of this committee is 2, and as there is always the possibility that I may lose connection temporarily during the broadcast, I'm nominating Councillor Williams to be appointed as substitute chair. Councillor Healy, are you happy to accept the nomination?
Sorry, just unmuted. Yes, I'm happy to do it with that.
Thanks very much. Councillor Williams has been appointed as substitute chair. Although what we're going to try and do is, if one of us drops out for, technical reasons, we will adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to let that person back in, if possible, so that we have all three of us present at all times. Persons in attendance. Well, I think we've gone through the attendance sheet, but Ms. Wright, have I left any? Well, I guess we have to do the applicants now and all that.
Yes, Chairman, if you'd like me to go through the applicants, responsible authorities and objectors, I can do.
Yes, please.
Yes, of course. So from the applicants team, we have Ms. Tricker, Mr. House, Ms. Gove and Mr. Berthold, and I've checked all of their connections. If they'd like to just quickly check that we can hear them again. So Ms. Tricker.
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. House.
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Gove.
Good morning, everyone.
And Mr. Berthold.
Good morning, all.
Thank you. I'll move on to Mr. Mahaffey. We have checked his connection. Keith, are you still with us?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I'm still here.
Thank you, Keith. Ms. Severus from Planning will possibly be joining us later. She's just an observer, Chair. Then if we move on to the objectors, I have Fiona Fleming-Brown. Can you confirm your attendance?
Good morning, Chair.
Then can I, Ms. Lambert? Sophia Lambert, are you with us? Super, thank you. Gwendolyn Godfrey, can we check your connection?
Good morning, everybody.
We have this problem of an echo or a feedback from, I don't know whether it was from Ms. Lambert or from the next one.
Ms. Godfrey, can we just check your connection again, please?
Yeah, good morning, everybody.
Oh, super. That's great. And then Ian Butchoff, we've checked you, but can you just confirm your presence?
Yes, good morning.
Thank you. Right, Chairman, that's everyone.
Sorry, Ms. Right, could we ask Ms. Lambert to just say something again to make sure it wasn't feedback we were getting?
Here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Could you just say something more? Yes, we can. Okay, it's fine. I think it's fine.
Yes. You can hear me now, can you?
Yes, it's a bit tinny, but it's okay. Yes. Without feedback.
Right. Is it better like this?
Yes.
Right. Well, I have both my camera's switched off.
Okay. Well, we'll see. Yes, when you come to it, you can switch your camera on and we see what happens. There seems to be a delay on the line, so we'll just always give it a couple of seconds before we speak to each other, so we don't speak over each other. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, that was the evidence that it took a couple of seconds for me to arrive at Ms. Lambert's end. Turning to the procedure, a copy of the procedure was circulated with the papers, but in summary, it's as follows. First, the licensing officer, Paul Phelan, will give a brief outline of the application. Then I will ask Ms. Tricker, the applicant's legal advisor, to present her submission. She will have up to 10 minutes to do so. The persons accompanying Ms. Tricker may give evidence during these 10 minutes if they wish to do so. Then members will ask any questions they may have of the applicants. Environmental Health will ask questions of the applicant next, followed by questions from the objectors, but not Ms. Lambert, as she is a witness, not a party. Next will be Mr. Keith Mahaffey of Environmental Health, who will present his objection, and he will also have up to 10 minutes to do so. Members of the committee will ask Mr. Mahaffey any questions as they may have followed by questions from the applicant. Next, it will be the objector's turn and to have the opportunity to present their objections for up to 10 minutes each. Today we have Fiona Fleming-Brown and accompanied by Sophia Lambert, Gwendolyn Godfrey and Ian Butchoff. They have, of course, already confirmed their attendance and the functioning of their equipment. Then members will ask any questions they may have of the objectors, followed by the applicant asking questions they have of the objectors. After this, we will ask, just a moment, I must make a correction here. After this, we will ask our legal officer, Heidi Titcombe, to deal with any questions she may have, for example, regarding any conditions. And we already know they're present. And finally, we will turn to the governance team to see if any issues have been raised that we need to consider. There will be no summing up and the meeting will end. And as you know, I think, or if you don't know, we will reach a summary decision within 5 days. I would like to remind everyone that the committee has read the papers which comprise the main pack and additional submissions circulated, so there is no need to repeat their content, but please do draw our attention to certain points and pages, as a member of the governance team will be able to put the document on the screen for us, and you can already see the first page of the report. So, well, let's get going. Mr. Phelan, can you please outline the case for us? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Today's application has been submitted by Portobello 95 Property Limited for the variation of a premises licence at 95 to 97 Portobello Road, London, W11 2QB. The premises currently trades with a premises licence which permits the following licensable activities: sale by retail of alcohol on and off the premises, provision of late night refreshment indoors, playing of recorded music indoors, exhibition of film indoors. A full list of the activities and times currently permitted can be found on pages 1 and 2 of today's report. Today's application seeks to vary the plans associated with the third floor of the premises and to amend, delete and add conditions. A full list of the proposed changes can be found on pages 3 and 4 of today's papers. I can confirm that this application has attracted a representation from Mr. Keith Mahaffey, a Senior Environmental Health Officer. A summary of Mr. Mahaffey's representation can be found at pages 3 and 4 of today's report. A further 12 representations have been received which oppose this application. This includes a representation from Councillor Ian Henderson. A summary of these representations can be found on pages 4 to 5, with copies attached at Appendix F on pages 40 to 52 of the main bundle. I can also confirm that this authority has received 24 representations in support of the application. Again, a summary of these representations which support the application can be found on page 6 of today's report, with copies attached at Appendix E, pages 53 to 76. Council records show that at the time this report was written, the premises had received 15 noise complaints over the preceding 24 months. A summary of these complaints can be found at Appendix H, pages 77 to 79. Council records also indicate that at the time of writing this report, one temporary event notice had been submitted over a preceding 24-month period. That concludes the summary of this application. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Dory, you're on mute, Dory.
Thanks. Yeah, the usual story. Ms. Tricker, could you please present the applicant's case? And you have up to 10 minutes, and please do turn on your camera if it isn't there already, if you wish. We'd like to see you, at least for a few minutes.
Good morning, everyone. I will turn my camera off only because I'm not in London and my connection is a bit dodgy at the best of times. So I will turn that off now, but I am present.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully I will be within the 10 minutes. I may need a minute or two just to go through the document circulated yesterday, if you'd like me to do that initially, just to assist members. So as we've heard, my client's seeking to amend a number of operational conditions on the licence, having regard to COVID, the regulations, the guidance for COVID and the viability of the business, but also, of course, having regard to the licensing objectives and the council's statement of licensing licensing policy. The latter two, my client fully appreciates members shall have full regard to. And like all licensed premises, it's been a tough time, and in making this application, we have considered its location and what can be done to support reopening in a safe way without impeding on the neighbours, and to allow the premises to open safely and responsibly. I really think it's important to consider what the variation is seeking, and to put it in perspective, there's essentially 4 aspects to this variation. There's the retractable roof on the ground floor, the windows, the seating at the front, and the 3rd floor. I will go through these elements shortly, but just confirm at this point that there's no overall extension of hours sought to the terminal hours of the premises licence. They remain as is. There's also no police objection to this variation, so there's no crime and disorder concerns. They haven't raised any issues of crime at the venue or drunkenness or other antisocial behaviour. So we are dealing with the prevention of public nuisance. A number of conditions we've proposed are time limited. That was following discussions with Keith Mahaffey, as he had concerns of the permanent nature of the variation, which my client can appreciate. Councillor Henderson in his rep also seeks assurance that the fire regs will be observed and no fumes will cause nuisance. The latter also raised by a number of other objectors associated with the church, and we can give that assurance today. It's been inspected, all the equipment and plants, and have a maintenance schedule in place for that. If there's no evidence now of issues, then the slight extension of hours to assist in ventilation shouldn't result in any complaints moving forward. Just as a brief background, and you'll have read the previous decision which was circulated, and the aspirations there have actually come to life. Nick House, one of the owners, he was resident at Denby Mews when he bought the premises. He didn't want it to become a rowdy venue. It is a neighbourhood premises, and many residents attend from the borough and the immediate area. It is a food-led venue. The staff are local. We've had excellent feedback on the food, and the supporters confirm this in their reps. It is also laid to tables and chairs, and if you visited, the plans on the licence at page 19 and 20 show the extent of the seating, which is how it looks now. Nick House is still one of the owners. He's experienced operator, 22-year career, and he told the committee on the last occasion his vision for the premises would be very similar to the Markham Inn, where he had taken an old rundown pub and transformed it into a modern food establishment with a drink offering. And that's the case. He's achieved this. There has been, we say, unfair snippets of the website in some of the representations, and not whole passages of the website is quoted. My client fully appreciates that there are fears with this application, and he does note all the concerns raised. But if you look at the complaint history, there's really none to do with the normal trade outside, and the existing and proposed conditions really support the licensing objectives and control the operation. Obviously, you've read my submissions, and I won't try and repeat everything, but I do point out that the existing condition 44 sets out requirement to have a dispersal and smoking policy, and our policy now goes further to include details with staff movement, internal cleaning and closing down strategies. This is, of course, a live document, and it's reviewed on a regular basis, and the policy was previously amended to the council. So the variation that we're dealing with, the first element, the retractable roof. It's closed at 9 p.m. now, Sunday to Thursday, and 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. And we want that amended to close at 10 p.m. 7 days, which results in a 1-hour extension on Sunday to Thursday. But the overall terminal hour of 10 p.m. is not being changed by my client. The variation for the retractable roof is purely to assist with ventilation, and the licence holder would be content for the condition to be time limited to the 30th of October 2022, and then revert to the hours originally granted by the members. The second aspect is the window opening. Currently, they close at 9 p.m. on the ground floor, and the upper floors must stay closed at all times. And we want that amended to close from 9 p.m. On all days of the week. If this amendment is accepted, then condition 19 would be deleted, so they go together. And this variation just represents a change of allowing the upper floors to improve circulation and ventilation. Again, the overall closing time of 9 p.m. has not been changed, and we have sought the balance for the ventilation purposes. The clients still have a responsibility to ensure that we don't cause a nuisance at any time by way of conditions 8, 9, 11 and 12 on the existing licence. The last thing my client wants is to face complaints and cause issues with the council and the licence. He's been responsible in the past and he'll continue to do so. There's already conditions about musical systems, and the client, so far as it comes to the third floor, is also offering a sound limiter. My submissions talk in the guidance about ventilation being important. I won't repeat that there, but I know you've read it. The third aspect, just on that one, going through Heidi's circulation, we haven't time limited that, but it's completely up to members if they wish to time limit that. And in terms of the comment on emergency or any essential maintenance, which we've added to the proposed condition, again, we'll leave that up to members. We haven't had to open windows on the upper floors for essential maintenance in 2 years. So it's really up to members if they grant that extension. We're not going to push for it. The third aspect of the variation is the ground floor terrace. The current restrictions are to 9 p.m. and we want those amended to 10 p.m. The premises has a pavement licence. It's in the report, and that's till 10 p.m. And this variation is just sought to mirror the pavement licence. The council's already granted to 10 p.m. and we're happy to curtail all activities to 10 p.m. And management practices will allow us to achieve this. In terms of this ground floor area, there's site wardens, specific wardens on site on busy evenings of the week to ensure quiet dispersal of customers, as well as ensuring that external noise pollution is kept to an absolute minimum. The nights are obviously risk assessed. They do have security if that's needed. Now, the smokers are also monitored by staff to ensure no noise nuisance arises. The outside's swept regularly. We have bins and also clean the pavement. And the smokers by staff aren't encouraged to remain outside, but literally have their cigarette and go inside immediately. And obviously we have the condition, which we haven't sought to change, that after 9 p.m, no more than 10 patrons can leave and have a cigarette. Staff dispersal in the late evening has also been addressed in the outside management plan. Then we come to the third floor of the premises, trying to speed through this. And we do note that the two neighbours directly beside the premises have not put in reps, and many immediately opposite the premises have not put in representations either. We do have support from that area. Operationally, just so there's no misunderstanding, it's for seated patrons only. It has an indoor and an outdoor element. The boundary of the outside area to the right of the premises, as you look at the venue, it has plant there, and there'll also be screening to act as a buffer too. And this is being dealt with by planning. And EH, Keith Mahaffey, inspected this last week, and I understand he's got no objection to it. Alcohol is sold and supplied ancillary to a table meal, and there's a maximum capacity of 20, which includes the inside and the outside of the premises of the third floor. The hours sought 9 p.m. for the terrace or area is well within the guideline hours of midnight in the council's licensing policy. Of course, we wouldn't be seeking midnight given the proximity of neighbours, but we do think 9 p.m. is a fair representation of the operation being sought out there. We understand that Environmental Health are also seeking clarity and assurance that patrons will be off the terrace by 9:30 p.m. And again, this is acceptable to the applicant. It was requested by Environmental Health, just that clarity as well. It will be fully monitored by staff whilst it's in operation. The third floor, just in terms of noise nuisance, there's no intention to have DJs or entertainment. We don't have that at the venue in any event. It would be background music, if anything, would be played. And as I said, we've got no objection to installing a sound limiter. We do not want complaints. The fit out for this third floor will be about £30,000, £30,000. Sorry, I'm Australian. So it is an investment. But if the council thinks it's appropriate and proportionate to limit the terrace area to 30 October 2022, that would be accepted by the applicant. Then if they wanted to do a variation later on, it would go through the full consultation again. We have put in our submissions revised conditions dealing just to incorporate all these points. And if I just pick up on the legal the circulation that was yesterday in terms of the third floor, I think that also incorporates most of the proposals that we've offered. The only point I say on that is point B, all licensable activities on the third floor, including the terrace, shall cease by 9 p.m. for the internal aspect, we were seeking those hours to be as per the premises licence. The internal area is contained, there's no noise, there's no vision, it's seated, alcohol ancillary to food, and we do want to run to existing hours. Certainly the terrace is proportionate for the early hour and to time limit that, but the internal aspect is protected by all the conditions on the licence. So we would say there's no reason for the 9 p.m. closing. In terms of control and ensuring that these conditions and proposals are being adhered to, the operation and management plan extends to the 3rd floor. There's also additional staff training. There's conditions on the licence about that, and it's very robust. And my client can expand on that to set out exactly the training and acknowledgement by the staff of what the licence conditions will be. But needless to say, the staff and management have full understanding of the restraints. It can be managed. We certainly don't want the premises to be on the radar of residents. Just in terms of the retractable roof, outside seating and windows, we've also operated with these terminal hours sought previously, and there's been no specific complaints on these aspects. So if other days of the week are used to match these terminal hours with the same trade, there's no reason why further complaints should result. My client knows that members will want to make sure the conditions reflect public nuisance licensing objectives, and we fully appreciate there's a balance that we need to get right. And we have sought to do that in this application, and the changes can be dealt with in the conditions proposed. We're aware of residents' rights and we want to work with everyone. It's not located, the premises, in any stress area, and the licensing regime is permissive one unless there's good reasons to restrict the licence. And there are many, many conditions which address a number of measures to safeguard the interests of the residents, and these have been working. Just in terms of the other additional conditions that are on the note, I think the last point I wanted to make was on the 3rd page of Heidi's circulation.
You've overrun by 2 minutes.
Oh, can I just make this last point, and then if members wanted to hear from my client, or they can deal with their points in questioning, perhaps this might just assist members. The additional conditions the committee may require, which is on the last page of the circulated document. Condition 1, the applicant would have no issue with. I think it just adds consumption of alcohol, which they would do anyway. In terms of the second proposed condition, and I don't want anyone to misinterpret these comments, but my client has always been receptive. It's not a high-risk venue. It's food-led. We welcome conversations with everyone, but we have had a lot of support from the local community in terms of planning and licensing applications. We're willing to meet with residents, but there hasn't been continual complaints to justify this as a condition, we would say. We're running a compliant venue. They all have our numbers. And they can call us, and we'd prefer to deal with any issues then and now. And I just want to make the point that we have integrated into the community in terms of the community support. We've helped fund Christmas lights for Portobello Road when the council was unable to. We've supported KNC Mutual Aid Group, volunteers which throughout lockdown with food in the Colville, Norland and Nottingdale wards. And we've also supported the Colville Marlborough schools throughout lockdown with food as well. So we are very much working with the community and have an awful lot of community support for the operation and for its efforts. And that was just in relation to second proposed condition. I'll leave it at that. I don't know if members did want to hear from my clients at this stage, just about any various points.
Sorry, but you've overrun now by 4 minutes, and
I'll stop then.
We have to stop here, and of course other speakers, and particularly objectives, will also get the extra 4 minutes.
Absolutely.
But thank you very much. Right, well, committee members, Councillor Healy Williams, what questions would you have for the applicant? Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to know how Gold is operating at the moment, given that there are still quite strict conditions about this kind of premises.
Nick or Ginger, can I pass that over to you?
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, so we're operating. I'm sorry, I've got Ginger sitting next to me, who's one of the managers of the premises. But we're currently operating within the government guidelines, which effectively mean we have a seating environment on the exterior of the building, and we install social distancing and all the various government guidelines. I mean, whether you want to go into any more detail on that, Ginger?
Yeah, hi, Ginger here. So yeah, I manage the property throughout the COVID period, and whilst we are dealing with the outside tables, we are currently a table of 6 would be the largest table. We can only fit 28 on the exterior, which we've never breached. We have a smoking area which we designate off-site for our guests, and we limit it to a 1 metre plus for social distancing.
Councillor Healy, if I can just add that they do have a pavement licence, obviously, and that's in the papers, which they've been trading off at this point.
Yes, indeed. And could I ask, if this variation were to be granted, would this make any difference to how you operate?
Again, Nick, can you answer that, or Ginger?
Sorry. Would it make any difference?
Yes.
I don't believe it would make. No. I don't believe it would make a difference.
So you wouldn't be expecting more people to come to Gold if we were to allow this variation?
I mean, as I said, I don't believe. I mean, we're a popular establishment, as you know, but I don't believe it makes a difference. I think it enhances the consumer experience with effectively more an offering that has more kind of fresh air. In a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay.
If I can just add to that, obviously during the COVID regulations, there's social distancing requirements. So the full capacity of the premises licence is actually less. They can't fit more people in the premises or cram more people in, which they don't do in any event. They've still got to comply with social distancing, which means, as for all licensed premises, it's less customers within the premises when they can open inside the premises and also outside.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to ask about the third floor and the terrace up there. I think there was a very helpful photograph circulated just in the last day or so by the applicants. That's the one that shows this. I actually walked round past the front and round the back, and if you go through an archway next to the church, you can see this very well. And they're also behind, that's facing that to the rear of properties. I think it's Waterford House. So my first question is, how, I'm not entirely clear, hitherto condition 47 would suggest that there's been no use of the third floor at all hitherto, yet the comments by Councillor Henderson suggested that might not be the case. Could you please explain how this third floor has been used hitherto?
Sorry, the question, is that question aimed at me? Sorry, Nick Houseby.
Yes, Nick, if
yes.
you can answer that.
I mean, it's not being used by patrons, so it's as per the license, really.
Right.
I mean, we use it for some storage.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, if I can just add, in terms of the councillors, by the comments by Councillor Henderson, are you referring to the website quote that he says in his representation?
Well, I was thinking, yes, we then went on to the roof which overlooks the property, which I mean, I'm not, yes, I really related to this was the lady who had complained quite a lot and who's now moved, I think. I wasn't entirely clear what that wasn't through activities on the third floor that was causing her problems.
Not at all.
No, fine. Okay. Now
so the third floor has not been used at all.
Fine. No, that's fine. So obviously that will be a significant change, and it will affect the people. I think it's in Waterford House. That's right, Waterford House, and also 92-96 Kensington Park Road. The rears will be affected by this. Now, I'm sure you posted, as you're required to do, a notice of this application at the front of the property, but I guess there was no way that people living in Waterford House might well not have been aware of the current application.
In terms of the advertisement of the application, everything was done as per the regulation, so there was no misinformation given to people as well. I understand the council also communicates to local residents in terms of the applications lodged. And in terms of the community environment, the local community was aware of this application. It's shown by the support that's been generated and the objections that have come in as well, but also the community interest in terms of the different groups that my client has been involved in. As I've mentioned in my submissions, they're all fully aware of this, and certainly we have taken into account the location of the premises, and that's reflected in the proposed operational points, while we're confident that we're not going to be causing a nuisance to any person in terms of the operation, in terms of not having, any entertainment up there, all to be seated, and alcohol ancillary to food. I note from the legal officer's circulation that there was a comment as to whether or not alcohol would be ancillary to food for certain days or times of the day. We are more than happy to have alcohol ancillary to food at all times. That is how it's going to operate.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just come in there in terms of the notice requirements? This council does not notify residents formally. The residents can sign up to a website, but we don't send letters out. It's not correct to say that we do advise residents who live in the vicinity.
Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah.
Thank you. Could I use this opportunity to say that call out to all residents to sign up to the licensing and indeed planning notifications. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Williams, go ahead.
No, I think that's all I have for the moment. Thank you.
Right. So there's a few points I'd like to raise with the applicant. One is the comment by Ms. Trickett about one of the supporters not being so close. I understand from the map that's what it looks like, but we've checked the address of that residence, the dot south of Denby Terrace. That person appears to live in a flat which actually overlooks Gold. So that may not, it's obviously not a big distance, but in terms of this noise issue, it is significant that the person appears to actually front onto Portobello Road. That's the one point I wanted to make. Secondly, in no particular order, in the dispersal policy, could you please define what roof acoustic integrity means? That's all, yeah. Anybody from the applicant team?
Nick or Ginger, would you like to deal with that just from the works that you've carried out at Gold?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. This is referring to the ground floor roof, correct? Yes. So, when we first acquired, when we first acquired the building, it was that rear roof over the garden area was effectively plastic sheets, so it's effectively open air. So noise emanation would have been relatively dramatic. So we installed at a cost of roughly in excess of £100,000, let's say, a high quality mechanical glass roof structure that created a far more appropriate approach to addressing noise emanation.
Thanks, but what does that mean? Have you taken any measurements of sound coming out when it's closed?
So to answer that question, we involved an acoustician along that journey. I think realistically, to answer you as accurately as possible, I'd probably need to refer to our note from the acoustician, who's not present, I'm afraid.
Okay.
The acoustic report was a condition, and that was submitted to Mr. Mahaffey as need be prior to the premises opening. I have got a copy here. It was prepared by Gillian Scott, noise impact assessment. Mr. Mahaffey can probably talk to this with much more clarity, but sound measurements were taken throughout the neighbouring premises as well.
Sir, would it be helpful if I give a comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mahaffey. Yes, why not give it now? Yes, I was going to ask you later. But
the actual retracting roof that they have when it is closed is a very high efficient structure. It's double glazed, etc. It depends very much on what goes on down there. As you know yourself, if you put music onto a lot of bass, it'll come through the structure. But the whole thing is really, it's the management of the levels inside the premises and the generation of bass that's the issue with regards to it. But when it's open, then voices and conversation just flow out of it. And I think this has been part of the issue that we've had the complaints about in the past, is to do with the voices being heard at the back of the premises, especially on the terrace of a neighbouring property. But at the same time, at the moment, it's when it is closed, it contains most of the sound within the premises.
Okay, thank you very much. Because you haven't defined anything like we do in planning, where we define noise levels at certain distances. Okay, thank you very much. Second one is on page 37 of the pack and 38 of the main pack. There's a mention of employing SIA employees on busy days. Could you please define or talk about what a busy day means? What is busy?
Nick, would you like to deal with that as well in terms of the change between wardens and your risk assessments that you carry out in terms of security?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at the point now. So currently we have a manager that's trained in the outdoor area, which I think Ginger can go on to probably provide more detail, sitting next to me. And this kind of individual acts in the capacity of a street warden, which, as you might imagine, has various duties, which is recording incidents, if any, be it whether created by us or whether just randomly happened along the street, coupled with the kind of all the classic examples of the dispersal requirements, which is ensuring our guests leave in an orderly manner and maintaining the license.
So the risk assessment for security, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ginger and Nick, is typically on the Friday, Saturday nights to deal with that, but that would be dependent upon the bookings that the premises has, the number of people attending, etc. So in terms of whether or not a security is needed is dependent upon what's happening that week, or they might have think that it might be an event in Portobello or whatever within a weekday, and they might suggest, well, during this time I think I need a security just as that outward presence as well. So it's very much monitored, and it is a live decision that's made depending on what's happening at the venue.
I think equally, when the street gets busier and busier, we have to kind of, maintain, just maintain the environment as best as possible.
But I mean, it sounds like you might be attempting to make short-term decisions as to whether to employ such assistance or not.
No, not at all. sorry to interrupt you. Certainly in terms of booking security, etc., and they will know what's happening at their venue in advance. If events are booked, or it might be a group that's being booked and things like that, that will be done in advance. It's not going to be a short-term decision that's being made. Ginger, do you want to talk about management meetings and how your weekly, or even, I don't know if you do it weekly or fortnightly, but how your decisions are made in terms of employment of security?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hi there. So we hold a managers meeting every Monday afternoon, which we go through reservations for that week. If we are expecting an particularly busy day, we will get our security / door supervisor in, who essentially they're communicating with the management team throughout the day or evening, depending on how busy we are. We have 3 supervisor duty record books on hand. If there are any issues whatsoever, they communicate with the management team, but essentially the noise, smoking and dispersal policy coincides with that. They are trained on induction. So as well as me being the DPS of the building, I also hold the induction procedure. This is, of course, given to all employees on induction, and after 6 months of employment, it is then refreshed.
Sorry, I'm not clear if you finished or whether I've got a connection problem.
I finished.
Chairman.
Sorry,
Chairman.
I dropped out for about 10 seconds. Yes.
Another question. Yeah, just again.
William, Councillor, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to check that I heard the last sentence before, because it suddenly went very quiet. I wasn't sure whether I dropped out or whether the speaker finished speaking. Could you just repeat the last sentence, please, or thereabouts? Because you said you have special events.
Yes. So essentially, sorry. So essentially, I do the induction procedure, which entails noise, smoking and dispersal policy, which is trained and signed off to all staff. Not just trained and signed off, but obviously maintained, managed and supervised throughout the opening hours. After 6 months of employment, not just the door supervisor, but all employees are refreshed on the dispersal policy itself.
But so you will have on the payroll 1 or 2 or 3 SIA trained staff, but they may not be used for guard duty if not necessary. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Right. So it's not employing an outside party, from a third party supplier of security guards. It's your own staff who will be delegated to stand outside. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can I just ask? So you from what it seems to me to be is you do not deem Friday or Saturday nights busy nights. It's in this context. So it's only if you've got special events or something like that.
We manage it according to our reservations, but of course, if we do have an event, we would classify that as a busy evening, yes.
Okay. Sorry, you count Fridays and Saturdays as being busy evenings?
We do, yeah.
Sorry, my line.
That's okay.
Sorry, I think signal isn't brilliant, unfortunately. Okay, thank you very much. I've got 1 or 2 more, but I'd rather let Councillor Williams make his points or ask his questions.
Yes, just returning to the question of the 3rd floor, you are applying for a condition where all licensable activities will cease at 2100 hours. When does that mean that all patrons will have to leave the 3rd floor by 2100?
In relation to that, there was a meeting at the premises last week with Keith Mahaffey, and I understand, and Keith will speak for himself, obviously, that Mr. Mahaffey was asking for confirmation that all the patrons and the terrace will be empty by 9:30 p.m. And that's why we included that in our proposed amended condition.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of just to ensure that there's no persons out there. The third floor is also part of our management policy in terms of clear outs and things like that. And so in terms of the terrace area, that is alcohol ancillary to food at all times, and that can be cleared. But in terms of the internal area where we were seeking the existing premises license hours, that won't be cleared until the next day. We don't want to have any unnecessary staff up there.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask one matter of clarification
Sure.
of Lana? Is there going to be a difference in hours on the third floor in the inside of the third floor? So is it that you're proposing the outside terrace will finish at 2100 hours with everyone leaving by 21:30, but the inside will actually continue to the licensing hours?
Yes, that is what we're seeking in terms of the application. In terms of the 9:30 dispersal, if members would like to limit that back to 9 p.m, we will deal with that. That was again a request that had come from Keith Mahaffey to deal with that, but of course that's all in the members' hands.
And can I just have clarification? Is this supposed to be time limited?
Yes, for the terrace area, we've sought that to be time limited.
But not the internal part of the third floor, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, but again, we would leave that to members.
Right, so if members wanted to limit the inside of the third floor to up until October 2022, you'd be happy with that?
We'd be less happy, but we would we would accept that.
Okay, thank you. I just needed that clarification on that. Thank you very much.
So I just follow on that. If we have people inside on the third floor, but not on the terrace, let's say 22:30, I mean, is there the same standard of acoustic insulation on the third floor, which looks to me like a glorified shack, as we've heard there is in other parts of the premises? I'm concerned there will still be disturbance to people in Waterford House.
We're confident that there's not going to be a disturbance. There's £30,000 being invested in terms of the fit out for that premises. And in terms of what the operation is, there'll be no music or anything background. If anything, there'll be a limiter in place as well, and there will be seated patrons. The inside capacity of the premises is also less, so literally we do not believe that we would cause a disturbance with all the other mechanisms and the conditions on the license that the premises needs to comply with. We're confident that
Lana, I think the actual party wall line of the third floor internal element is further away from the boundary lines as well.
Okay.
Fantastic, thanks.
Would it be helpful if I give a comment on this now, if that would be? What I would say is that the building performance is only as good as the type of activities that are taking place inside it. If they're playing loud music, then clearly it has to be of a higher standard than what it would be if they weren't. But if they're sitting at tables, eating, conversing with low-level background music, then clearly the sound would not travel as far as it would be if the level of music was much louder. The whole thing is looking at to be able to encapsulate the sound within the structure. And clearly a lot of that will also come down to having doors closed later in the evening when the background levels reduce.
And I confirm certainly all the doors will be closed at night when the premises leaves, the terrace closes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Otherwise I can carry on with what I had in mind. As I said, it was in no particular order. The objections that have been recorded, and I'm talking about the ones in particular that don't relate to construction noise, which presumably is a one-off, and we can discuss that with Mr. Mahaffey later. But there are a number of objections which do appear to be concerned about regular operations before the pandemic, and then during that period when the lockdown was removed, when things were loosened up. So we cannot say that they do not relate to special circumstances. And in this connection, I noted that you declined to accept formal meetings with the residents as suggested. And I would have thought that's good politics and good neighbourhood relationships to do that. It's all very well to support this activity and that activity, which Ms. Tricker mentioned in her opening presentation. But what really matters is noise and nuisance. And so I'm just wondering whether the applicant would reconsider just accepting, otherwise we may have to impose it, accepting the concept of formal meetings with residents, or offering to have meetings. If they don't turn up, then that's up to the residents. And to include residents nearby and possibly right behind. This is not something we haven't done before, we have. So let's say in the building on Kensington Park Road is to put a notice up there as suggested in the condition about formal meetings. Would you like to comment on that, Ms. Tricker?
I would.
Somebody in the House.
I will comment, and then I'll ask Nick just to speak on this point as well. And as I said in my original submissions, I don't want my comments in terms of that condition being imposed to be misinterpreted, but my client has always been receptive to comments with the residents without it even being imposed as a condition. They do it in any event. They have a numerous support. We welcome all the conversations, and we do meet with residents, and we have a very good relationship with the locals. And it was from that perspective that we didn't think it was proportionate to put that condition on the licence. Nick, can you just further explain your work with the local community and your contact with the nearby neighbours, or Ginger, you may be able to do it. Just to give some information to members about the community.
Exactly as you said. I mean, it's certainly we're a very approachable people. We're heavily integrated with the local community, whether it be taking a parcel for Hannah that lives opposite, or a parcel for Jamie that lives down the road, or the dog bowl we have for Liam that lives 6 doors up. You know, we're heavily ingrained with the locals. We're a neighborhood restaurant, so it certainly feels like the wind is in our sails, as it were, in terms of local support, where our patrons are locals on the whole, and we feel that we're fully open and amenable to talk at all times. I mean, Ginger, who's sitting next to me, is probably more on the floor than I am. She might want to articulate her relationship with the current neighbour at 99 and so forth.
Yeah, hi. So I've been here since April 2019. So I've seen pretty much the whole restaurant opening up to what it is now. Yes, we have had difficulties with 99, but since post lockdown, I'm on incredible terms with him. I had a coffee with him yesterday, for example. Take his post, he takes our post. Liam up the road, you know, having conversations in the middle of the street, setting up the terrace. It just, the gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he owns the map shop, sending our guests down to purchase maps, for example. You know, there's a real sense of what I feel a lovely sense of community, which has not changed, and that's how I feel.
Ms. Tricker and Mr. House, as I said before, it's very, yes, I see the hand up, I'll come to that. It's all very interesting and delightful, and I'm very pleased to hear of all this community assistance, but we're discussing noise and nuisance and not whether you keep somebody's post. And what so I'm pleased to hear all this, and it's good to hear, and maybe more establishments should follow your lead in this, but this is not subject of the licensing hearing. The subject of noise, and this particular aspect is noise and nuisance. And if you had all this, it is interesting to note. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you.
did somebody want to say something?
Yes, I did just want to
okay.
just mention one more thing. I completely understand it's not about the post, but I think where I was heading with that point was simply I've had conversations about, especially when there was issues on Portobello Road last year, how our neighbours were in support of us as to how it was not us.
Okay.
That's where I was heading with that point. I apologise.
Understood. But if I may just follow, that's okay. I understand the point very well. I think we all do. But what I'm trying to get to is the fact that if you had all this wonderful relationship with the people right nearby, where were these supporters? I mean, of these supporters, 2 of them within shouting distance, so to speak, of the premises, but the rest of them didn't. And if you were able to gather, sort of, if you like, gather the support in writing, it only needs to be a sentence, as in fact most of them have done, 1 or 2 sentences. If you're able to gather all the support, why haven't you got them from the people next door and from people who live totally, really far away? In terms of this, obviously, many of them are in walking distance, but it's not a 1-minute walk down Portobello Road around the corner and Denby Terrace. So this is the thing. This is the puzzles. That's why, sorry. Can I just finish? That's why I'm wondering why you are not willing to have a formal meeting once in a while. I mean, that can be discussed, but why don't you have a formal meeting? Because if you're full of supporters, then nothing to worry about. Thank you. Please go ahead, answer that. I mean, make your comments.
Nick, did you have some comments you wanted to make?
Not really. I mean, I've got no problem with having, I've got no massive issue with having a formal meeting. I think a quarterly meeting feels excessive, and I feel it being a condition on the license doesn't feel proportionate. That's my only view.
Well, supposing we said 6 months, just as an example. I'm not saying we're going to do any of it, but just for the discussion, so we know what to consider, Mr. House. So how about once in 6 months, for example? Would that be more acceptable to you, as proportionate?
Yeah, I mean, look, listen, we can meet once every 6 months. I just, again, still don't think it being a condition is entirely fair. But happy to have that as part of our management policy, to have a open residence meeting every 6 months.
Okay. And if we did it, as I said, obviously it's only a discussion point at the moment, this would include notifying in some form or another also the residents that are overlooking the back of the building, the terrace at the back. So that would mean, say, a notice in 1 block on Kensington Park Road, for example.
Sure, totally.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that concludes my my questions, actually. Thank you very much indeed. So if there's anything else, do my fellow members have any more questions after all?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Williams? I'll take that as a no.
No, thank you.
Okay, so in that case, would Mr. Mahaffey, have you
yes.
Have the objectors asked? Mr. Mahaffey can ask questions. Sorry about that.
Sir, I have a couple of questions I would just like to explore with the applicants, if that's possible, please.
Yes.
It's really to do with capacity levels for the terrace. In the document, the external management plan you produced, you said 20 people maximum. Is that 20 people on the terrace? Or is that 20 people on the 3rd floor?
The whole of the 3rd floor, Keith.
That's for the whole 3rd floor. What is your how many people would you be willing to, are you able to house within the small area on the 3rd floor, the internal area? What when we mentioned we were there, you said it's probably a table of 6. Is that correct?
Pretty small, yeah, exactly.
Right. So basically, if you were to have people sitting in the terraced the internal area, you'd have 6 people, and then you'd have 14 tables and 14 chairs and so many tables outside.
Something like that. I think having the versatility of an overall number for the whole floor probably makes it easier to manage.
Right. And are you happy to have that as a condition on the license to say no more than 30 people shall be seated at tables on the 3rd floor?
20, Keith.
Or sorry, 20. Sorry, apologies. 20.
I know.
I'm being very generous.
Yes, we are in terms of the capacity of 20 seated. Yes, that's what we applied for, and that's what we're happy with.
That's fine, and just to confirm that there'll be no vertical drinking, external vertical drinking on the terrace on the 3rd floor.
Right.
That is correct. Everyone will be seated at all times.
Okay, that's fine. That's the main concern I wanted to raise, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Mahaffey. And now we can turn to the objectors to ask any questions. Well, Ms. Fleming Brown, sorry, Miss which way around? Miss Fleming Brown, would you like to start?
It's a point of information, really. I'm certainly aware that we have. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, we can.
I can.
I'm certainly in possession of correspondence, as is chair of the Ladbroke Association, as are the 2 Colville ward councillors.
Oh, Ms. Fleming Brown, forgive me for interrupting you. I just noticed Fiona Jackson, legal advice, and this has a question raised her hand. It might be relevant before you come to it. So forgive me for interrupting, Ms. Jackson. Sorry, Fiona. Gosh, there's a hand up. Fiona Johnson, sorry, Fiona Johnson. No. No.
No, Chair. I think it might be.
Sorry, Ms. Fleming Brown, please continue.
Okay. Just to say as a point of information, I and the chair of the Ladbroke Association and the 2 Colville ward councillors, Councillor Press and Councillor Henderson, are certainly in possession of correspondence showing that the tenant or the owner of 97 was far from happy about the operation of the Gold. This particular person is an interior designer by trade and so does travel frequently, but I think it's inappropriate to say that she's decided to live in Ibiza. I think she was living there for part of the time during lockdown, but I'm not aware that she intends to make Ibiza her permanent home. And we were quite happy to lay the correspondence in front of the committee.
Well,
is that a question? Is that a question of the applicant?
Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear.
At the moment, we're dealing with questions. So if any of the objectors have questions of the applicants, could they ask them now?
You can make your statements later when you'll get your turn, but now just ask questions of the applicant.
Well, I would ask Mr. House and Mr. Musgrove whether they have received any similar letters from Miss Phillips, because she is their neighbour, and I'm aware that it's not as has been presented.
So is the question, have we received a letter from...
Mr. House? Or...
Sorry, I've just stepped away to go to the toilet. Can you repeat the question, please?
Have either Ms. Grove or Mr. Howes received emails or other correspondence from 97 Portobello Road indicating that Ms. Phillips, who operates the shop and actually lives above it, was far from happy with the way that the Gold operates? Because I have a voluminous correspondence, as have a number of other people, detailing how unhappy she was about the noise and nuisance and her treatment.
Yeah, we're acutely aware, and as is Keith, because Keith deals with these issues. We're acutely aware of the difficulties we've had with Miss Phillips. I mean, we repeatedly tried to address her issues. I've turned up to mediation meetings that Keith has chaired. we've spent in excess of, well, tens of thousands of pounds of addressing issues over time. And I mean, Keith may be the best person to comment, to throw a true maybe air of fairness on the matter.
I'd be very happy, sir, to give to
yeah,
comment.
Mr. Mahaffey, would you like to comment?
Yeah. Yes. What I would say here is that there are issues with sound transmission between both parties, and clearly what we have been trying to do is to work closely with the premises and the neighbour to try and get some form of resolution. This application, it's very much an ongoing process, having the right measures in place and processes in place to address your concerns. The big issue we had was the transmission of sound across the party wall from people coming up and down the staircase. This has all been dealt with. We've put acoustic underlay on the staircase to basically reduce the impact, and we've looked at the measures that can be put in place to stop the impact transmission across into your property. The problem we've got is that, you know, people coming up and down the staircase do so during the daytime, and they also go through to the end of the evening when the premises operate. So there is transmission there, and we have been looking at that, and we've been looking at the isolation of that. As far as the use of the terrace, which really this application is...
Sorry, just quickly, Keith, we also subsequently spent tens of thousands of pounds building out the wall with acoustic treatment, then carpeted the stairwell on top of the acoustic and the whole of the second floor additionally.
Yeah, in addition to this application basically deals with the noise from the roof terrace into the property next door. The big issue here is the fact that there is a kitchen extract system, and this is going to be acoustically treated, where the installation of acoustic screening, and all this acoustic screening will have an effect at providing a barrier between the use of the terrace and the property at number 99. The only issue that we really have is basically the later opening of the skylight and the voices going into the property next door. But this is an issue which the committee will have to take into account, and I'm happy to discuss that further.
Mr. House or Ms. Tricker, any comment?
Not from me.
No, it's my understanding in relation to the sound transmission between the party walls that that's been resolved, and certainly there's been no issues or complaints or anything like that from the brother of Katrina who's living next door. Is that right, Ginger?
Yeah, that's entirely correct. Yeah, Ginger, sorry, she just stepped back into the room. There's been no complaints
No.
Ms. Phillips's brother, correct?
No, I had a communication with him 2 days ago, where he said he actually really liked the setup that we've got outside. He was very positive about what we were trying to achieve.
Okay. Is there any other comment you wanted to make? Right, let's see. Two people have raised their hand. See if I can find out who they were. Ms. Godfrey would like to ask a question.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have actually three questions of Ms. Tricker and the representatives from the Gold. The first is, I'm a local resident. I live directly opposite the Gold. Our bedrooms are in the front of our property, and I'm concerned about the noise and the nuisance when the property is operating normally. I was at the original hearing, and I was aware of the condition that there was to be a complaints log, so that if anyone locally had complaints, they could go to the property, complain, and hopefully have their complaints considered. Shortly after the property opened originally, under Mr. House's control, there was a problem with noise. I went across to the Gold. I asked the staff, I complained, I said, could my complaint be recorded? And I was told there was no such log. So my first question is, I'm just an ordinary person living across the road. I got very short shrift from the staff when I went and complained. So to be entirely honest, I gave up on complaining in that way. So my first question is, did you ever maintain a complaints log, and how will local residents like myself be able to complain in future?
Firstly, it's Gwendolyn.
Well, Gwen, yeah.
So, firstly, obviously I'm deeply apologetic if anyone was short with you, because that's entirely the opposite of how we operate. We run, I think it's fair to say, a very friendly team. So I'm very, very disappointed to hear someone was short with you. We do have a management process in place where, I mean, Ginger probably is best to talk about what that management process is in terms of complaints. The original DPS back then was a gentleman called Alex Galeb, who I believe made his mobile phone number very, very available to residents, be it Katrina or Alison, that was also next door. And I'm sorry to hear that he didn't make his mobile number available to you. But I mean, we certainly are very, very interested in keeping local people like yourself on side. I think you're in the same block as Hannah,
No, I'm not actually. I actually live in Denby Terrace in one of the houses diagonally.
I see. Okay. Well,
so as far as I'm aware, no attempt has been made to involve any of the resident, myself, in any kind of dialogue with you, beyond initially a letter when you were first opening up from the manager saying, you know, you were opening up. I've had no direct communication from any of you since then. If I could just pass on to my second question, which is that there was mention earlier of the fact you have an area for smokers to smoke in, and you restrict that to up to, I think it was 11 people. But as you know, the pavement outside the Gold is very narrow. You have a tables and chairs license, I assume, for the area which, you know, is above your cellars. There's then a narrow part of the pavement that passers-by can walk on, and obviously at the moment you've got your temporary tables in the pavement in the road. But if you could please, can you just explain to me where this smokers area is? Because as far as I can see, the only place smokers can go to are standing in the middle of the road or elsewhere on the pavement, causing a noise and disturbance.
Hi there. Hi. Yeah, of course I can explain that. So our smoking area as it stands whilst we have this pavement license is currently, we've made a 2-metre gap between one of the exterior tables directly outside of the premises. Down Portobello Road there's a 2-metre gap, which is, we know as management are aware, we can't have more than 8 or 9 people smoking in that area, so it is very much managed on a day-by-day basis. If there are more people smoking there, we simply tell them to.
And most of the smoking is when the street is quieter. In the more the evening, Gwen.
Yeah, but that's the point. That's the time when we don't really want people standing in the street having a fag and having a chat, because this is a very reverberant area.
They're on the
carries. Of course, we treat the smokers similarly to people waiting for a taxi. We simply ask them to wait inside and not to cause any noise.
If I could just assist, and perhaps Ginger, you can give Gwen your mobile number, and you could meet to discuss if there's more, if she feels there's a more appropriate area, and you can talk about it.
Absolutely. Well, that's the point, Lana. I'm not sure if you've ever visited the premises.
I have.
But there just isn't a more appropriate area, because it's not a huge frontage. There's a narrow pavement, and at the moment, as far as I can tell, rightly, you're wanting to maximise the amount of tables and chairs you've got. So I can't honestly see any area that smokers can smoke in, apart from wandering into the road or wandering further up the pavement?
Well, unfortunately, we do need to provide a smoking area to contain that. We can't not have a contained area through there. So in these times where a pavement licence is in force, we do need to work together to find a place that that everyone's suitable, that everyone feels is suitable as possible.
What we will do, Gwen, is following this call, Ginger will get your number. I'll happily meet you as well. Is we'll talk through what we're doing. And if you can,
I just needed an answer to the question. You know, where is your designated smoking area? And as far as I can tell, forgive me if I'm wrong, the designated.
Would Ginger just explain that? But maybe she can mark. I mean, she doesn't have a map to mark on the street where exactly it is. Right. She could do her best to explain to you on this voice call.
Okay, all right. And then the third question is, you mentioned all this community involvement. I wasn't quite sure, as I started out by saying, how this related to my neighbours and I round here. Certainly, I'm not aware of anybody telling me about this application or discussing anything with me. So I'm just wondering, how was it that looking at all the supporters that you have on or who wrote in, I can see that 2 lived locally and, like myself, probably could have seen the notification on the gold when you applied for the variation. It looks as if another 4 may possibly live, you know, in walking distance,
3,
but the remaining 18 don't live anywhere near here, and because of lockdown and everything would not have been having any reason to visit the premises. So I was wondering how it was that they all knew about this and made these representations. Are you able to answer that?
Well, I'm advised by, I mean, in some regard, I'm advised by my solicitor Lana in terms of how to make the application. Certainly the application, we felt that we had a positive support from a number of residents, be it Hannah that lives opposite, be it Liam that lives probably 7 doors up the road, which was, and be it Jamie Lang that also lives probably 6 doors down. So, I mean, I don't know what to say other than we felt as a management team, it wasn't purely one person, that we had good quality, good local support for it, and followed the kind of the process that my solicitor advised in terms of the application process.
Right, that's fine, Nick, but I just wanted an answer to a question. How was it that 18 people who do not live anywhere near the gold nor would have been visiting it found out about this application and wrote letters of support? Are they regular customers?
Well, maybe they're regular customers, and maybe with good intentions, our management teams asked them to write a letter of support, and it transpired that they've either moved or didn't live in the location we thought. It was, I don't think there's anything more contrived than that.
Right, okay, but I mean, I think they do illustrate the fact that when the gold is open, not very many people seem to walk to the gold. Many people come by car or cab. But anyway, obviously, thank you for answering the question.
I don't think that's entirely correct, actually. But
that's all right. That's my only questions, Chair. Thank you. Hello?
I'm here, Gwen. I don't know what's happened though.
Yes, well, I've finished my questions. Thank you.
Hello, it's Heidi Dixon here.
I was cut off. Sorry. Thank you, Ms. Godfrey. Turned off my microphone and forgot I'd done it. Thank you very much.
Don't worry. Thank you.
I want to just say that the point about the supporters not living very near or within earshot, I think is the most important thing, is that we noted that before. So thank you for mentioning that too. I'd also like to take this opportunity of appealing to residents for this case or any other case. If you have a problem with noise, tell the council. Obviously, in this case, we have had representations from residents, but tell the establishment, get it into their complaints book, but tell the council at the time. And I will raise that question about a video when Mr. Butchoff speaks later, because video is an excellent piece of evidence which we haven't seen, as far as I know. Somehow in this, it's not been presented to this meeting. So first of all, I'd like to call on Mr. Butchoff. I think he's got a question or two of the applicant. Mr. Butchoff.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Really, my biggest regard, my biggest worry is the terrace. I live 4 doors away from the Gold, and I have to say, I think the Gold is a very, very good addition to the street. I'm very happy it's there. I think it's a good restaurant and it's very, very well run. So I don't have a problem per se with the restaurant. What I do have a problem with is my privacy and noise. I have a roof terrace. I'm lucky I have a roof terrace, which I enjoy in the summer months. But unfortunately, the Gold has their proposed roof terrace is probably a level and a half above mine. So my biggest concern is noise, smell, but also how is the external area to be shielded, basically, is my question. Because if I have to put up with an additional noise in addition to the people sitting in the street, the people with the open roof, and now another 20 proposed people sitting on the terrace who are told they're only going to be seated, but at some point they're going to have to stand up. My privacy is being invaded. So I'd like to know,
Ian,
how they're going to mitigate that.
Ian, can I answer? Sorry, you don't mind me calling you in. It's
no, absolutely not.
Mr. House here. Thanks for your comments, positive comments, by the way, much appreciated. Listen, I mean, if I was in your situation, I'd entirely have the same concerns. I mean, first and foremost, we're fully aware we don't want to make anyone's life a pain and a nuisance. So how do we execute that roof without making people's lives a nuisance? So I think we spent a fair amount of time with Lana just working out what is considered fair and fair and can be manageable. I think so we initially talked about, well, at 9 o'clock is when, that's when it starts. Really, anything beyond that's probably not entirely reasonable. We talked about having very, very low level background music. We also think that from an internal management perspective, having being able to make the decision of what would be regarded as a inappropriate party, i.e. a loud group of, people in their late teens, something like that would be a major red flag to our decision-making process. In terms of you being overseen by guests that are potentially standing up, I entirely agree with your point, and will make every single effort in how we dress and how we screen the establishment, screen the area and the party wall line to ensure that no one does overlook you.
If I can just add a few points, Ian, there is plant on your side of the roof where your terrace is, looking at the map, and there's screening for the plant as well. So that is going to screen off all the views to your premises. We are higher up as well, and all our patrons will be seated when they're on the terrace. So you shouldn't be overlooked in any way, and should not be causing a nuisance in any event by the conditions that we've proposed.
I'll happily walk you up there with our interior designer Ian and show you what we envisage.
I appreciate that, and equally I'd like to show you my terrace and show you the situation from my side of the fence, so to speak.
We can do that.
So the visual thing is one thing, but obviously the noise is another. And, you know, in the evening and the summer, I like to sit on my terrace and maybe have a couple of friends around, have some dinner when we could, and enjoy that, you know, peacefully. At the moment, we have a little bit of a problem with Corb, which is also backs onto to my terrace or opposite, with their ventilation. Sometimes that gets a little bit noisy, but on the whole, I would say they're pretty good. And on the whole, you're pretty good. I mean, we do have noise when you have your bottom retractable roof open, but I you know, okay, I put up with that, but I do feel that with 20 people sitting on the roof, however well shielded, I'm going to be surrounded by constant noise 364 days a year, 18 hours a day or whatever it is, and that's my biggest concern.
Okay. I want to I mean, I guess, I mean, we've gone it, Lana, the solicitor, and I have gone in with this trying to mitigate any or as many concerns as possible. I'm just kind of thinking on the hoof how I can give you further comfort in terms of noise. So I'm just thinking on the hoof, really. I mean,
certainly, if I can just add in terms of noise, in terms of any background music, there will be a limiter in place, which will be set in consultation. I think, Keith, you'll come and do that, and we're more than happy to be for him to go onto your terrace in relation to that limiter. Obviously, we would go to closer venues as well, but as a backup, I think there should be, given your concern, measurements and checking from your terrace as well in terms of the noise nuisance, and that would eliminate any issue there. In terms of persons, as Nick said, it is essentially sort of a private dining experience. Alcohol's ancillary for food. We're not seeking that to be restricted only after a certain period of time. It can be for the entire time that is open. So we are confident with the existing conditions as well that we don't cause noise and nuisance, that you will be able to enjoy your terrace.
Well, if I may just make one final point, and I appreciate everything you said, but reality is when 20 people are sitting on a terrace enjoying themselves and drinking alcohol, they get noisier and noisier as the evening progresses, whether they realise it or not. And, you know, unfortunately, it's a matter of fact. It's the same when the restaurant closes at night. People are quite intoxicated, and they don't leave quietly. They leave noisily. So, you know, with the best will in the world, I don't see how you can mitigate that noise as a resident. The thing is that the way that the buildings are constructed, it is a sort of rectangle at the back. There is an enclosed square. And it does reverberate. The sound does reverberate and amplifies. So, you know, it's not just 20 people sitting on a terrace. It really amplifies around the buildings, and that's my biggest concern.
Again, just to show willing, I will take your considerations very, very seriously. I mean, immediately, the first thing I would say that just, you know, I'm not sitting next to my solicitor, so she can't proverbially kick me under the table. But immediately we could probably put the external area at 15 people max and the internal area at 5 people max, which again mitigates it further. I can look at some of the finishes to avoid further noise reverberation. I mean, you know, I feel your comment is entirely valid, and if I was in your situation, I would have entirely the same. I would be asking the same questions. So I take your comments very seriously, and I will be open enough and transparent enough to meet with you and the interior designer to see how I can address noise reverberation, screening issues, and be willing to take the exterior element of the numbers to 15 max and the internal element 5. So again, it further mitigates the issue. Well, hopefully an issue, because I don't want to cause you an issue.
No, thank you, and I appreciate that. And I think
so if I can just, sorry, Ian, if I can just comment, and I'm looking at the note that was circulated yesterday from Heidi, point on the last page dealing with the third floor wording at point D. Nick, from what he said, is the maximum capacity on the third floor, including the terrace, shall be limited to 20 persons at all time. That could be added to say with no more than 15 persons outside on the terrace.
I'm willing to do that for Ian, yeah, of course, and willing to, as I said, attend his premises with my interior designer and him attend ours to look at how we can provide him further comfort.
Okay, I'll be very happy to do that. Thank you.
And also,
the screening issue, Nick, has been dealt with in planning as well, hasn't it, in terms of acoustic, just sound and visual aids in terms of the plant equipment. So you have looked at that acoustically already.
The other thing, Ian, is we can have an internal policy whereby we vet the type of people booking it, so that we don't get like screaming. You know, I don't, as you know, we're not a venue that attracts screaming kids anyway. But you know, I'd be heartbroken if there was someone that slipped through the net. But we can have a screening policy, a management policy that talks about how we screen people that do book that top area as well for you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the reality is that most of your clientele are quite young people, and as I say, alcohol does tend to louden them, if you like, at the end of the evening.
If all people in their 40s young, then I guess that's a compliment. I'm mid 40s, so I'll take that.
Right. Okay, all right, fair enough. Everyone's young compared to me. Thank you.
I doubt it, Ian, Mr. Butchoff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more? Okay, so now have the objectors got any further questions? Obviously, Mr. Butchoff just finished. Ms. Fleming Brown? No? Okay, and by the way, I can see a legacy hand up or two. Wait a minute. Mr. Butchoff's got his legacy hand up. I don't want to call it an old hand. It's a legacy hand. I picked that up from some other meeting. And we've now been sitting for an hour and 40 minutes. And we have reached a point where it's a good moment, I think, to call a break, because then we have the presentation from the responsible authority, which is Mr. Mahaffey in this instance. So I suggest 10 minutes and reconvene at 11:50. Thank you. Right. Hello. Looks like we're at 11:50 according to my computer clock. So could we check we have everybody present, please? Councillors, Williams is here.
Yes.
Councillor Healy.
Yes, sir.
Right. I guess the applicant, Mr. House.
Yes, we're here. So.
Hello. Yeah.
Right. Looks like everybody's here. The objectors. Mr. Mahaffey is here. After all, he's on there. Mr. Mahaffey.
I am here. Sorry, sir. I'm very slow at getting my microphone turned on. Sorry.
Don't worry. We all suffer from the same thing. I reckon one day a song is going to be written about these meetings, and a lot of the verses will have to have something to do with muting and unmuting. Ms. Savarus, are you here, actually? Cheryl Savarus? No?
She hasn't joined, Chairman.
Okay. Just wondering. Okay. Right. Well, if we're all here, I guess we can carry on. And at the start of Mr. Mahaffey's presentation, I'd like to put the point which is to the applicant, who can respond if they when they respond to Mr. Mahaffey anyway. But I just want to make the point that because part of this is a matter of managing the issues, managing the clients, that they're not too noisy, that they disperse, and so on. So this is not directly to do with current discussion, but it shines a little bit of a light on it, and that is the pavement license for the parking bay tables and chairs, which is the one that's in the pack. Although the drawing is lousy, but I've seen it elsewhere. It does say in the license there should be a barrier. The license is for heaters, umbrellas, etc., a planter and a barrier. And admittedly, it's a one-off picture, but the Google Street View picture doesn't show a barrier. So I'm just wondering.
I can comment on that, Chair, very quickly. We've been very recently the taps were turned on in terms of when we could reopen. We've got bizarrely a very complicated situation that we're trying to address, which is finding a step and barrier that doesn't create a further issue as a trip hazard, whilst concealing the umbrellas. And it's become like almost an engineering headache to basically create this barrier. So we've been battling away bizarrely with more than just the builder on how to create the barrier and the step whilst not creating a trip hazard, because we're really effectively battling with the curb height and the camber of the road, creating knock-on issues. So, sorry.
It's on mute.
Yeah. Sorry, you're on mute there.
There we go again. Thank you very much. I mean, this is, as I said, it's a management issue. So as far as I can see, I understand there can be problems. Have you looked at the way other people do it? And more importantly, have you told our tables and chairs department? Because Neil, you haven't complied with the license.
So Neil Squires is our tables and chairs consultant, and he's aware of the issues that we're having with the step, and he's the one that has the regular dialogue with the tables and chairs team. And I believe he's been trying to communicate, but they're heavily backed up in terms of the dialogue and communication to that effect.
All right. Listen, have you looked at how other people are doing it in the area, like Westbourne?
Yeah, it's not again, it's really not straightforward, because we're trying to cover the bases of the umbrella which brings the stage up at a certain height, which then creates a trip hazard. So and we have a camber issue. I won't bore you with the details.
No, it's okay. We don't have to discuss detail because it's not really subject to this license. It's just the management side of it is that you've got a license which
Yeah, we're acutely aware what we have to do, Councillor, and
Okay.
we're attempting to. Well, we've been trying to address it for some time.
Okay, all right, because I thought it's just a barrier to separate you from the cars. Anyway, I think we can now call on Mr. Mahaffey to present his case.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will try and keep this as brief as I possibly can because
you've got 10 minutes.
That's fine. Well, I'll try not to use them. Basically, I have to say when this application came through, it gave me a lot of concerns. I would have preferred to have seen some form of pre-application advice coming in so that we could actually have set up some dialogue with residents beforehand and basically an application that went in. I always take the view that the best way of putting an application in is to keep it modest and not to ask for things that basically would then result in getting residents very, very concerned. And clearly there has been a lot of concern with this application, and I shared those concerns when the application came in. I'm very pleased to say that we were able to come to an understanding with regard to the application, and we basically agreed to go for a time-limited one. We have premises which are coming out of lockdown now, reopening. They've had a very severe period of time with no trading, and clearly it's very important that they're given every opportunity to work within the current COVID requirements and guidelines. And clearly that's part of the reason why I feel that there needs to be something granted here to basically assist the premises through the process. But at the same time, we have to look at the impacts that it creates and the public nuisance that arises. The street pavement licenses are granted to 10 o'clock. So in my view, if they're permitted to be outside to 10 o'clock, having people out at the front of the premises till 10 o'clock is not going to be make much difference, because it is going to be the same noise. If you stop one, it's not going to make much difference. So from that perspective, I have no issues with a 10 o'clock start or 10 o'clock finish at the premises, as long as the area is cleared at 10 o'clock. I have to take into consideration there are premises across the way which overlook the premises, and properties across the road which overlook the premises, which have bedrooms overlooking this pavement license, and I'm minded of the impacts that this can have on them. Clearly, it's all down to good external management and having a proper management plan in place to monitor and assess, liaise with your neighbours, and to take on board recommendations and further mitigation as and when it becomes necessary. External management plans are living documents. And as they're living documents, they need to be updated and upgraded as and when problems arise. And this is clearly where I feel liaison is a very key issue in regards to this application. The next thing is to do with the roof, the third floor terrace. Again, we haven't had a chance of trialling this through temporary event notices, so we don't really know what the impacts of it will be. My view is it's really to make sure the best way of dealing with this is to time limit it, and also to look at the hours at which it operates so it doesn't go late in the evening. The actual area that is available on the roof terrace is away from number 99. It's more towards number 93. If you look at the plant on the diagram that has been put up on the screen, you can see that there's a lot of building services plant. Now, this is probably going to be about 1 metre high. There will be a barrier and acoustic screen around it, and I'm sure there will be a cosmetic screen on the interior of it, because it's not very pleasant for people to look at. All these screenings, if they are over and above the plant, will have an effect at reducing the overall transmission of sound further down the road towards Westbourne Grove. The issue really is a transmission of sound to the properties at the back. Now, the nearest property at the back is on Kensington Park Road, and it's quite a distance away. We also have a terrace at number 93, which is right next to this terrace. And clearly this is something which could be probably screened by as well. And this is something which I'm very happy to meet with Mr. House and his consultant, and hopefully we can look at how we can mitigate against the sound. The important thing is to have absorbent screens positioned along the perimeter of 93 and 95. And hopefully this is something which we can look into as the as the scheme progresses. I also looked at the numbers outside. If there's no loud music, the only issue will be voices, conversations and things like that. The area will be reverberant, but it's not going to be as reverberant as you have in some cases, like a restaurant down in South Kensington, where you can actually hear them cutting the steaks on their plates. It's going to be far enough away. It will be the conversations, and clearly a lot of this is going to be down to normal conversations being transmitted. If there is no background music where you're competing against high volumes of sound, then the voices levels do not have to be high. And it also, a quieter environment is more in keeping with the ambience of a restaurant. And that's part of the reason why we would prefer to see it operate as a restaurant rather than as an area where people are encouraged to talk and vertically drink. The other issue really is the fact of the internal room, and to make sure that all doors and access to the premises is restricted after certain hours, whether that'll be 9 o'clock or 9:30. That'll be for a decision for the committee to make. The second thing really is the other issue is really to do with the internal roof, that sliding roof. What I would say here is that the voices and conversations do go out of that roof. When it's closed, then they are contained within the premises, and I don't have any issues with regards to that. It's really to understand how we can mitigate against this. At the moment, the COVID regulations encourage places to have lots of ventilation. The more ventilation you have, the less the virus can spread. And clearly, it's all part of the processes of space, ventilation, etc., that the government is promoting at the moment. What will happen in the next number of months, we don't know. But at the same time, the premises has to have ventilation. And clearly, I would prefer to see the people safe inside the premises and give an extra hour on this on a short-term basis. The fact is, we can look at these premises and review them in 18 months when the conditions fall away. And if they are managed correctly, then clearly that's going to be the best way forward. It can be decided on whether they will be a further application comes in. And it's always good to prove that they have got everything correct in their in the processes and their management of it. If they don't, then clearly they will have to explain what they're going to do and why they failed to do so at a further hearing. But the whole issue here is now for residents and ourselves to work with the premises to be able to deal with any complaints. The lady across the way, I really would like to have some form of conversation and liaison with her, so that she could come directly to me if there are problems, and hopefully we can talk through them with her. At the end of the day, the premises have to get their processes right. They have to ensure that if they are given this opportunity to operate later outside, have a bigger bearing on residents, that they do everything in their power to manage it, and manage it in such a way that residents are going to be minimally inconvenienced by it. And if there are problems, there must be a liaison process, and clearly that is something which we need to do. I feel residents' meetings are appropriate. The problem with setting residents' meetings in conditions is the fact that residents' having conditions are a bit onerous. There may not be a need for one within a period of time, but there also may be a need for one in a shorter period of time. But as and when residents have the ability to call such a meeting would be appropriate. Other than that, sir, I don't think I really need to say anything more, other than management of the premises is key, the operational plan is key, and hopefully they will operate in such a way that will be commensurate with the residents in the area.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahaffey. First of all, to Mr. Butchoff, his hand's up. Is that legacy or was that new?
Sorry, Chair.
Ms. Titcombe wants to speak too.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I just wanted to come in for clarification because Mr. Mahaffey has just mentioned the importance of all these variations to be time limited. However, I just want to make it clear that the applicant has not proposed, they're not offering themselves that all the variation should be time limited to October 2022. They have said that the committee has some discretion on certain aspects, but that my understanding is they want the third floor internal area to be permanent. So I just want to have to be clear as to what the application is, and Lana Tricker will correct me. Please correct me if I've misunderstood the situation. But all the variations have not been offered to be time limited, and I just wanted Keith's confirmation that in his view he considers, as I have just understood it, that everything should be time limited. Does that include the internal area on the third floor?
Mr. Mahaffey?
I'm going to get it right one day and unmute myself before I speak. Yes, I would be looking, hopefully, for the third floor to be time limited as well.
So, Mr. Mahaffey, you're saying your suggestion is that all the variations are time limited?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. I mean, bearing in mind the discussion that went round the original application, I guess that kind of is a logical consequence. Right. Okay. Do we have any questions from Councillor Williams?
Yes, I do, from Mr. Mahaffey.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Williams, I've just apologised. Ms. Titcombe still got a hand up. Is that a legacy hand or a new hand? Ms. Titcombe,
my apologies, it's a legacy hand.
Notice it's not an old hand. I'd hate to say that. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Ms. Mahaffey, I'm, as I've indicated, I have concerns for the impact on the properties on Kensington Park Road. You suggested that the terrace was sufficiently distant that it wouldn't have so much impact. Perhaps I misunderstood you, but my recollection, my looking through the arch yesterday, was that it could be a bit of a problem for people, particularly if they're trying to sleep and their bedrooms are at the back, which is likely to be the case, I think, in Kensington Park Road.
What I would say is this is the need to make sure that it doesn't go too late in the evening. I would take the view that residents tend to sleep between the hours of 11 and 7, but between the hours of 9 and 11, people want to relax and rest in their property to unwind before they go to bed and sleep. Looking at Waterford House and places like that, it's my view that a lot of the bedrooms are at the back rather than at the front. So living rooms probably are at the front. So the impact of it would really only affect people who have young children who want to go to bed earlier in the evening. That I would also be concerned that it would really to be with regards to the voices in the conversation, and clearly we don't have any temporary event notices. This is all unknown to us at the moment, so we don't really know what the impacts will be. Conversations can be loud, but we've got to basically ensure that if people are out there, that they are sitting out there talking in softer voices and being aware. But you can't force people to do that. All you can do is to look at the circumstances and to encourage people to be to just talk in normal voices, so they don't have to talk over music and they don't have to talk over people.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Could I just comment on this one, that if we wanted to have a formal meeting with residents at whatever intervals, then Mr. House did say he is willing to notify 1 or 2 properties on Kensington Park Road. So we could consider that as a possibility in that complex when we think about that.
I would be very happy to attend these meetings.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes, I'd be very happy to be there so that I can get a full flavour of what residents' concerns actually are.
And if I could just make one comment about the residents' meetings as we're talking about it. During the break, I had a helpful conversation with Nick, and we completely agree with Keith's sentiment. To put it as a condition is onerous, but we are going to include it as part of our management policy that we will have 6 monthly meetings. So it's not something we don't want to do. We have liaison with residents now, but just as a condition, we were concerned with that. But if I could just say that we would be putting it in our management plan to have 6 monthly meetings.
Thank you, Ms. Tricker, but how would we know, would you specify which properties would be notified? Because that's what
it would be the properties to be notified. We would, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over to you. I think we're cutting over each other, so I apologise. We would be notifying the properties behind, and we would take advice. We have good conversation with Keith. We work really well together. And we have good dialogue. So certainly, even if he said, well, I think you should include this resident, we will do so.
We'll take the lead from Keith. I think councillor is, I think, the point on how far, how broad we go and what residents we reach out to.
Okay.
Could I also suggest that really you're looking at some form of a trigger for residents to request one, as well as the premises to basically organise one, so that there, it could be that written into the external management plan that where chairmen of residents associations or specific residents contact us with regard to a meeting, that one will be arranged.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I just want to confirm that if a resident came and said, well, we want to organise a residents meeting, Nick House would say, sure.
Well, I would, as you know, Keith,
we have the conversations.
I've always been there when that's happened, haven't I?
Yes.
So would you be willing to, if you had agreed to a management meeting, a residents meeting, when you then notify the residents, you'll also notify perhaps our environmental health department, Mr. Mahaffey.
100%. We work well with Keith.
Yeah.
Because the way I take the point, you don't want to put onerous conditions on. We obviously not. Never mind about policy, but it clearly doesn't make much sense. But the way I see it is that it's a backstop for residents. There's a problem because you can see there are issues. I mean, I'm not saying 50 people have complained, but there are issues for some residents. And the way I see it is that a formal meeting with residents is a backstop. So if it's 6 monthly, you might get a request after 3 months to have one. And it's good that you would be happy to convene such a meeting. But you can see what I'm getting at. It's the feeling of a backstop. I mean, if you call a meeting for a day in 6 months and nobody turns up, that after say 15, 20 minutes, then that's it. It suggests there's no problem. If you do that again, 6 months later, nobody turns up, or one person turns up and it's dealt with, then there's no problem. And then perhaps one could review that. But you can see it's not an issue. It doesn't waste much of your time either. This is what I'm getting at. It's the backstop for the residents, the comfort.
Certainly, we'd be happy to include that on the management plan. And as Keith says, should members grant this on a temporary basis, obviously, I expect with the money that Nick's going to spend in terms of the fit out, he would say to me, well, I want to go back and make it permanent or for another time limited period or whatever. And we would have to come back before members and explain, you've made a note that we have residents meetings, and if we haven't, we would need to explain why not. But it's certainly not our intention, and it's always been our intention since opening to liaise with the residents.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Healy, would you like to ask Mr. Mahaffey a question or two, or make a comment?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Chair.
Please go ahead.
I'd like to ask Mr. Mahaffey about the complaints that have been made. They start on page 77 of the main bundle. It's been said that 15 is quite a lot, although this covers a 2-year period. And I note that there were several in June last year, which I think coincides with the period when a number of people were getting very cross about the fact that they were being restricted and were gathering anyway, not just at the Gold, but to several other premises. Do you think that is the main reason for these big crowds gathering outside the Gold in June?
Madam, my understanding of it is the fact that basically the police moved the people away from outside the Ginstitute and premises down on Portobello Road, further down. And basically they recongregated up here. And from my discussions with Alex, who was the DPS at the time, it was the fact that these people were not part of the premises. They were people who were not associated with it. But again, an awful lot of this really comes down to the exterior management and keeping full detailed notes of what's happening. Yeah. It's not just a matter of saying of keeping a record of what your customers do, but also what else is happening around you, so that it is recorded, so that there is some sort of information from the premises on what they're experiencing, as well as what their patrons are doing.
Yes, but I mean, from what you're saying, it does sound like these were not necessarily patrons of the Gold.
Yeah, well, that is my understanding of it, but the issue is I didn't see it, but that's what I was told by the premises, and that's what Miss Johnson advised me of from the licensing team, as far as I can remember.
Are we allowed to comment quickly, Keith? Oh, sorry, Councillor Healy.
Could I continue my line of questioning first, please? I'd like to refer you to the complaint by resident 1 on Thursday, the 26th of June, which was again crowds gathering outside the premises. It says in the action column that officers were unable to attend because of COVID. Has that happened a lot, or was this just a one-off?
Well, we have been running a service throughout the whole COVID period. The only issue that we've been having is going into residents' properties with regards to it. Not only is it the potential of bringing infection into them, but it's taking infection from one resident to another, and that's a concern by how we've done it. We've been doing our best to monitor outside people's properties, etc. It could well be that they weren't able to attend because of other issues that were happening in the borough. But my understanding is that throughout the whole period we've been providing a service, and officers have been out monitoring the borough throughout. So it may be we may have missed it because of other things happening elsewhere in the borough.
Could you excuse me just for a second? I will return, but I've got somebody at my door. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. We'll perhaps at that point. Okay. If Mr. House can make his comment now, then.
Sorry. Yes. So I'm sitting next to Ms. Gove, who was a manager on duty at that exact time, and she can provide some further light on those crowds.
Wait for Ms. Healy, Councillor Healy, to come back, perhaps, so she could hear you.
Should we wait for her to come back?
Yes, I think so.
I'm back.
Okay.
I'm back. Sorry about that. Could I also ask about the last item in this complaint?
Councillor Healy, actually, Mr. House wanted to comment on this particular issue of the incident you mentioned. So he just started, but we said we'd wait for you to come back to hear the answer. So perhaps would you allow him a moment to
Hi there, Ginger speaking here. I just wanted to comment on the June incidents that we're reading about now. I was actually one of the managers on duty alongside Alex Gallup, and excuse me, the service was normal until about 10:30 p.m. and we suddenly got a big rush of patrons walking along Portobello Road. We actually decided as a business to close early because we could see what direction this was going in. We tried our best to calm the situation directly outside of the restaurant, but I can assure you those incidents were not our customers.
Okay, could I thank you. I just want to, just to follow on that, if you look at the reports just above that in July 2019, twice the retractable roof was open or halfway open. That's nothing to do with the pandemic. And I mean, I don't know what time, what date you actually opened. I believe you opened in 2019 or late 18.
2019, yeah.
But you can see there were 2 incidents. Now, they don't seem to have recurred, but then, of course, since then, we've had mostly shutdowns, partial shutdowns. But you can see that this is normal.
Well, I mean, Keith,
what I mentioned earlier.
I believe Keith's attended to assess that issue, but at no stage did we ever have the retractable roof open beyond the permitted hours.
I see. Okay. 2014, 2246.
Sorry,
that's something of people. Noise from restaurant, 2114, and there's no time given for the 9th July incident. But I would hope they would not repeat. But you can see that there's, so 2114 is after the hours, isn't it?
Sorry, I can't see. Sorry.
Resident 2, Thursday, 18th of July, 2019, 2114.
Yeah. Again, loud noise from restaurant. I mean,
retractable roof open.
I can't really comment on that particular point.
Okay. But you can see that there are what we'd hope these are one-offs, and you got into your stride, or will get back into your stride. But you can see that there are issues which are very valid. Anyway, Councillor Healy. Sorry.
That's okay.
Finally,
thank you.
Going.
I wanted to also ask Mr. Mahaffy about the incident on the 28th of September, which is the last recorded complaint. And this was that patrons are on the premises after 10. It sounds like there was a good follow-up to this. And it says at the end of the column that they are now on top of this. Have a stringent end of evening procedure to get everyone out on time. In your view, Mr. Mahaffy, have they succeeded?
Well, we haven't had any particular issues with the premises, having people on the premises after 10 o'clock in the evening, but it's more to do with the enforcement of the various regulations that came in with regard to COVID. But again, an awful lot of this would be dealt with by our licensing team and our health and safety team, but we would be looking at what we witness. But it's not a particular problem has been on our radar. Because I do the reports every week for the licensed premises, and we look at all our visits, and the Gold has not been one of those premises that we would have been monitoring constantly to ensure that the people were off. So I would very much be of the view that it was a one-off occasion.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed.
Right. I'd like to raise ask a few points, again in no particular order. Mr. Butchoff said in his submission that he offered a video at some point, and video to me is always good evidence, as we know from other premises. Do you recall receiving this? Because he did say, do you recall receiving it, and do you happen to know what's in it?
I've received a lot of videos, but they were mostly from the lady next door at number 99.
Okay.
I cannot for the life of me remember a video from Mr. Burkhoff, but it doesn't mean to say that he hasn't provided it to us.
Okay, thanks. We can ask Mr. Butchoff about that. Just want to raise this. I think it was sort of touched on, but I would perhaps like to just make it clear for the record about the matter of closing the roof at 9, even if the party continues, so to speak, till 10. The two objectors raised this point, but it is this matter of ventilation because of COVID-19. So, I mean, I would agree. I think you made that point, so I'd agree with it, Mr. Mahaffy, that we want as much ventilation as possible. So, presumably, you are in favour of keeping things open as suggested by the applicant, if we grant the 10 p.m. closure.
Well, I prefer a place to be as safe as possible for members of the public. The problem is we don't know what the new variants are going to be like, and what's going to happen in the next couple of months. I think we just have to wait and see. They're talking about a third phase coming in. It may not be as bad as the last two phases, but the problem is the new variants can change things. I really would just prepare to see things as safe as possible. And if the government guidance says ventilation is key, then clearly I can't go against that.
No. Okay. I think I just wanted that made clear, because in any case, we hope that the pandemic is going to end, maybe even if not in June, that maybe by late autumn. So, it's a temporary problem about the ventilation, yeah. So we'll see. Okay. Do you happen to know, we may have to ask the objectors about that, but do you happen to know who the resident was who moved out because of the noise? Is that the one you were talking about? Where does she, apparently it's a she, where she lived?
Well, we've always had conversations with Miss Phillips, who lived at number 99 Portobello Road. Right. She's the lady who has had issues with the premises. A lot of it has been noise from the building services plant on the roof, which is now being addressed through the planning, hopefully through the planning process. It'll be screened and attenuated such that it won't be perceptible on her terrace. But the big issue for her was the transmission of impact sound across the party wall into her property, as well as noise from the roof, opening roof on the ground floor on her terrace. But at the same time, I had discussions with Mr. House quite a while ago, and one of the things I did suggest to him was putting up acoustic screens, absorptive screens on the party wall, which should have an effect. We did discuss that as part of the process, but at the same time, there's a cost involved in that, and it never seemed to occur. But then that's between both parties. But
Keith, really quickly. So, are you referring to the party wall internal level or the third floor roof?
No, we're talking about the party wall between the.
Yeah, so we did enact on that, and we spent in excess of £10,000 on putting acoustic treatment to the party walls. Inside.
I was talking about the party wall between the external party wall between the screens, between the roof and the terrace next door at number 99.
Oh, that was far more complicated, Keith, because the acoustician didn't believe it had. Sorry, this is probably a conversation for another day, but the acoustician had merit.
Yeah, but that was the only thing. It's really looking at how you can absorb. If you've got a reverberant environment, then the sound reflects. If you put in some sort of absorbency into the environment, then the sound doesn't reflect. It basically becomes absorbed, attenuated. So the impact can be significant.
Okay, so you mentioned planning, Mr. Mahaffy, because I didn't check out the planning situation. Are you saying the plant, etc., has gone through a planning process? In that case, there must be the condition about minus 10 dBA relative to ambient.
We're in the process of sorting that matter out at the moment.
For the plant.
That was part of the reason I was at the premises last Wednesday and met Mr. House and his colleagues, his consultant. It basically is the fact that there was a visual impact concerns about how the plant will look. But really what we were looking at is how do we then bring it in within the noise SPD for Kensington, which is the 10 dB below. And clearly we were looking at additional acoustical screening to bring it down by 5 to 6 decibels. And the other thing that we're going to do is to wrap the ducting, if you see the ducting there, in a rubberized wrap, which would stop the vibration and re-amplification of sound from the units. From the ducting. So in my view, if they do those works, it should be within the 10 dB below the lowest background and fully compliant with the noise SPD.
Well, then maybe I should add that to explain it to everybody else who's not aware of the details of this kind of thing, it really means 10 dBA below ambient at any time. So there's no absolute number. So when we come to the night time, when it's quieter everywhere, it means 10 below that quiet background level, and it might give comfort and assurance to a lot of residents, because I think that's not widely understood.
Yeah, we were looking. Yeah. Can I put it better? It's imperceptibility criteria, where if you can perceive it, it's a breach of that condition. But the other issue is that if the terrace is going to be used on the 3rd floor, they don't want their customers to be listening to the noise from their kitchen extract system. So it's imperative on them to get it right, and to basically look at the screening that is there, so that when people are sitting outside eating their meal, they're going to be able to eat there with the comfort that that plant is not going to disturb them.
Indeed, there is that point. Can I just ask, in the right of the picture, where that square ducting seems to lead away from there, is that part of the premises or is that next door? It's hard to tell. To the right of the country, the mini farm.
Premises. That's part of the premises. Yeah.
It is part of your premises. Yes. Okay, because it's hard to see, because there's a. It looks to me, it looks like to the right of the plants, there's some sort of vertical. Yeah, if you lower the just
as part of ours
thing, but it looks like it's demarcating an edge, but it is an edge, but it's not demarcating the end of your terrace. That's the point.
Correct. Yeah.
Exactly that. That's where the pointer is at the moment. Yeah. Okay.
That is the ducting to the extract, which is further round towards the front of the premises next to number 99.
Okay. I mean, so that means that it's pointing away from the church, because the church are worried about smells and so on, maybe hot air onto their new windows, relatively new windows. So, Mr. Mahaffy, do you think that the roof sort of acoustic integrity, whatever that means, is something meaningful to the residents in terms of results?
With regard to the plant, I feel that we will be able to achieve the imperceptibility criteria for the nearest residents when it is done. And also the fact is, I would expect them, if they were going to put screens up, it would be good to have two-sided absorptive screens to basically absorb voices as well as noise from the plant.
Right. Well,
and Keith, if I can just say, on all the screening issues that you've commented on, we're happy to meet with you on site, as we've done in the past, and to get your advice, as well as our acoustician. So there's no issue there.
The other thing, just quickly to mention, is there's a soft planting scheme as well, which will add additional noise dampening impact, as well as any fixed screens that Keith's advising us on.
Okay, thank you very much. Just checking if I had any other queries. No, I think that's it at the moment. If I think of anything, I'll maybe come to it at the end.
The only thing that I would also suggest there is that we look at some sort of screening for the bound party wall between 93 and 95 as well. I don't think it needs to be absorptive screening, but it's more from a privacy perspective for that resident.
Okay.
And no issue with that, Keith.
Which we've already, as I mentioned already to Ian earlier, I think is entirely appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, great. I think this is the thing we're going to face is we're facing is as the lockdown reduces. Obviously, you've got clients outside at the moment, but I think from 17th of May you can take clients indoors. And there will be a period, and maybe in June, I think there's a tentative date in 21st of June or whatever it is, to lift all restrictions. And I expect over this period you will get a rush, which of course we all hope all businesses get a rush to help them recover, but that will also cause the commensurate issues of noise and disturbance potentially. Anyway, we've had questions from the councillors, from the members. Does the applicant wish to ask, in addition to the comments they've made so far, would they like to ask any questions of Mr. Mahaffy?
I don't have any questions, Chair. I think I've made my comments along the way, but just to say that we will meet on absorbent screenings. The doors and windows will be closed as well when the terrace closes, and I've made comments just about the residents' meetings as part of the management policy.
Thank you. Mr. House?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Right, well, I guess finally we come to the objectors. Who would like to kick off? Ms. Fleming-Brown, perhaps?
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
You've got 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes. Don't have to use them all.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Fiona Fleming-Brown. I'm chair of the Pembridge Association. Portobello Road is interwoven between two conservation areas, the Ladbroke Association area and the Pembridge Conservation Area. So I'm called as my witness Sophia Lambert, who is the chair of the Ladbroke Association, because there may be some areas which are more appropriate for her to answer. I'm also a local resident, and I've lived here for the past 35 years, and I've lived just off Portobello Road for the past 22 years. And I'm a member of St Peter's Church, the Grade 2 starred listed church at the rear of the Gold. The objections to the variations of the licence proposed in this application are based on issues of nuisance to neighbours, which are exacerbated by the Gold's location and expansion. It's a small Victorian mid-terrace building, which means it's got neighbours on either side at its rear and across the road. It's quite densely residential, and as RBKC's environmental health team have observed, it's a reverberative area, not least because of the height of the rear buildings. The current operators have intensified their usage of the premises to increase the number of patrons they can serve, which has increased the nuisance issues reported by residents. Whilst the objections of residents are generally detailed, specific and various, the supporters of the Gold application tend more to say that they enjoy using the Gold as a place of entertainment. I also noticed that few of them live in the immediate area and don't have to suffer any nuisance issues themselves. I think it's significant that the Gold's own website describes the Gold as an ideal venue for garden terrace takeovers. While we understand that Mr. House needs to make a living, and I've got family members myself in the hospitality trade, residents also have a right to some quiet enjoyment of their homes, which is recognised by Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. This is especially the case in the instance of a 7-day-a-week licensed operator seeking to use their premises for later hours and to extend the area of operation to include the 3rd floor. While some of the changes proposed by the applicant may appear small, given the history of noise and nuisance which residents have complained about, they should be considered as an additional burden upon residents, which is unfair to impose upon them. We're also concerned that COVID-19 regulations are being used by the applicant to create additional concessions, which will be to the detriment of residents, many of whom are now working from home. These are people who don't enjoy the extensive air conditioning enjoyed by the patrons of the Gold inside. In summer months, they naturally want to open their windows in peace and quiet on hot nights, or to enjoy their own more modest balconies and roof areas, or perhaps they have children who need to sleep earlier than 10 p.m. There are already complaints about noise from patrons outside or who are leaving the premises in the evening. If alcohol is served for consumption outside up to 10 o'clock, I think that this is likely to exacerbate the problem. The ground floor retractable roof area is now proposed to be open all week until 10 p.m, instead of, as formerly, only on Fridays and Saturdays. This is likely to cause noise and disturbance for residents, especially for anyone with children or perhaps whose work requires an earlier start. If ventilation is required in the area of the ground floor, as per the variation condition 13, then the applicant could, of course, simply close the area an hour earlier and ventilate the area within the existing hours of the licence. If consent is granted, we seek a further condition that there is an earlier review than October 2022. This seems to us to allow far too long for what could be a nuisance to occur. The applicant originally agreed as licensing condition 47 not to use the 3rd floor, including the terrace. Although its website already says that it is set over 3 floors. This is a level at which many neighbouring bedrooms are located, and it was a welcome concession originally and supported by RBKC's environmental health representative. The applicant now proposes to allow a further 20 guests to occupy the space and to use the terrace in the most reverberative area of the premises until 9 p.m. In addition to residents' concerns, we're especially concerned about the effect of noise carrying to St Peter's Church at the Gold's rear. The church is widely used, for people who don't know it, for both religious and cultural purposes, and has an upper gallery wrapping around two of the exterior walls with seating and large windows, which are its sole source of ventilation. So these windows are much used in warmer weather. It can become quite a hot building. The gallery is frequently used independently of the main part of the church, including as a place of quiet contemplative worship and teaching, including during the evening until typically about 9:30. Given the enclosed nature of the site, we fear that inappropriate noise will disturb these quiet activities, either from the ground floor, from the open retractable roof, or the third floor and its proposed terrace. In any case, this is a premature application for this third floor usage, as there's a separate retrospective planning application yet to be heard concerning the movement of the extraction and other plant further up the roof, for which permission has not yet been granted. If it were ultimately, if this committee were ultimately to grant licence use of the third floor, we request that no music of any kind be played on this level, and we again ask for an earlier date of review than October 2022. We oppose the extension of the licensing hours, as not only will this cause nuisance to local residents, it will set a most unwelcome precedent for all the adjacent licensed premises in Portobello Road and Westbourne Grove, and we don't want to see a late hours arms race take place. We're mindful that there are a number, since the abolition of the change of use class order, we're aware there are a number of premises which may well become licensed premises in the future. And taken together, this could be very inappropriate indeed. We welcome the Gold's noise, smoking and dispersal policy, which indicates an intention to be a more responsible neighbour than has formerly been the case. But we question how the operator can ensure that guests do not hail their own Ubers or taxis or car-borne or noisy friends and continue to dally or make a noisy exit from Portobello Road, as has been previously observed. Gold staff can request in good faith, but as can be seen from the complaints, they cannot enforce good behaviour, and residents will suffer, as they have previously, when guests choose not to comply. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You did well. You kept within your 10 minutes. You don't want to call your witness at the moment.
Yeah. Could I be called, please?
Yes. Okay. Go on then. Get a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Right. Just to say, first of all, it's the Gold is in the Ladbroke Association area, and we think it's great. I personally can attest to the excellence of its food, and I like the outside seating that they put in the carriageway. But our experience is that high-level terraces are one of the chief causes of concern, and this one was a cause of concern even under the previous ownership. Although they didn't actually use it officially, it was used unofficially, and we know from our member Katrina Phillips that it did cause her quite a few problems. So that is our chief area of concern. Having 14 people, say at 4 tables, can create a hell of a noise, and I think we would be very concerned about that aspect in particular. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I see a hand up. Oh, that was your hand.
Yes, I'll take it down.
Okay. Ghostly hands. At least I can see them, which is good. Wait a minute. Somebody else is up, I think. Let me just check. Right. It looks like Ms. Godfrey would like to speak next. Her hand's up.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've made my written representation, so I don't really propose to repeat all that. It's just to say that my principal concerns arise from the actual operation of the Gold in non-COVID times, and the noise and disturbance at night when patrons leave, when their taxis or cars are blocking Portobello Road, and they also sometimes stop in Denby Terrace, and naturally when someone leaves a venue like the Gold, they're chatting, they're talking, and possibly talking a bit louder than normal. And when you're trying to get to sleep about 10 o'clock at night, that's a fair amount of disturbance. So anything that would extend the period when that's likely to happen, for example, extending the period when people can eat or drink outside, and extending the period when sales of alcohol in open cartons can take place, I think would be to the detriment of local residents such as myself. And at the original hearing, Mr. House actually offered up many of the conditions which he's now seeking to change as a gesture of trying to reach that balance between being able to operate his business and the interests of local residents. So I would be very grateful if the committee could consider my objections in that light. Just very briefly on the question of involving local residents, this was also discussed at the original hearing for the original licence, and I think there were statements made at the time of involving local residents, and indeed we did get leafleted letters from the then manager prior to its original opening. Since then, as far as I'm aware, there's been no attempt to involve local residents, and I do think going forward it would improve everybody's way of life and hopefully help the business to manage things appropriately if they did involve local residents. And I do think that should be inclusive. I'm particularly concerned about the fact that there is a local housing association which has a building on the corner of Denby Terrace and Portobello Road. And as far as I'm aware, knowing a couple of the tenants, nobody has ever approached them to ask for their views. So I think however a decision is made about involving local residents, it would be very good if it could be done on a completely inclusive basis. And I would suggest at least leafleting all the properties in the residential area. Finally, on ventilation, I'm not an expert on this. I'm a business person. Certainly in our own office, we can't operate our office at the moment because we have to review and do some changes to our air conditioning and ventilation system. So I would hope that the Gold's ventilation system itself is being reviewed and you're taking all the necessary steps to make sure it's safe, regardless of whether windows or a roof are open for an extra hour or not. And I don't think I have anything else to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Godfrey. I would like to say that regarding involving local residents, I don't think there's a legal obligation for anything to residents consulted. I think the key is that they complaints book, and they've now offered to have a plan to occasionally, whatever, we haven't discussed what, and it's up to them really, to meet residents regarding noise and nuisance. But I don't think there's any obligation on their part. I mean, it might be good neighbourhoodship, if that's the right word, for major changes for them to leaflet it, but there's no obligation to do so. And when there's a licensing application like this one, again, I don't think there's a legal obligation on the applicant to let anybody know. It's up to the local residents to, so to speak, find out, and for the council to notify, according to rules, according to law, the local area. And so I would like to say again, to encourage everybody to sign up, as I have done, because that's still for me the best way of finding out what's going on locally, is to sign up for the licensing notifications. I do that, and I have an inside track, if you like. I get a weekly note of all the licensing applications in the borough, but I want to know what's going on in my own area. So tables and chairs and pavement licenses can be come and gone in a week, and they won't appear in the weekly listing. So sign up, and that's how you'll find out, and then you can talk to them. But there is no obligation to let residents know as such, so you can't hold them to account for that.
Sorry, I do understand that, Councillor. I was really responding to the earlier statements by the applicant that they had involved local people and had supporters, and I just wanted to point out I hadn't personally been contacted. And to be honest, I agree with you. I do sign up to the local alerts. But if you're a social housing tenant, you might not even have access to the internet. And I do feel strongly we have to make sure that all residents locally are involved if there are going to be meetings to discuss the effect. But that's obviously up to the applicant whether they want to involve local people or not.
Yes, I just want to perhaps assure you this is a known issue, not to do with licensing particularly, but the question of internet connectability. But it's true there's quite a few who haven't got any connections, excuse me, but there's a lot who do. It may only be by telephone. That's the only device they have, but they are. Anyway, that's a separate issue, and
yes.
It's up to the council also, in a sense, to decide where to follow the law as to who to notify and when. Of course, under COVID, it's been a bit trickier, but there are notices. Notices go up. I mean, a notice goes up on the front of the premises, and if the premises don't display a proper notice, then that is subject that can be complained about. But at the end of the day, that's one of the ways of notifying residents, locals, that there's an application in. The same thing applies to planning. So anyway, perhaps Mr. Butchoff would like to say something.
Well,
I've got 10 minutes if you wish to have it.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think I've said more or less everything that I'd like to say, to be honest with you. As I say, I think everybody's brought their points to the table, and my serious concern is the extra added volume and noise of 20 people sitting on a roof and a retractable roof that's open for another hour in the evening, the reverberations around an area where things are amplified. I mean, I literally, if there's two people standing outside the back of the Gold, two of their staff having a conversation and a cigarette, I can hear every word they're saying. So what 20 people sitting on a roof is going to sound like, I can't even begin to imagine. So really, that's my only concern.
Thank you. So now we have questions from members to the objectors. Councillor Williams?
Yes, I mean, my question, and I will later when we discuss conditions raise it with the applicants, is quite clear, I think, from what you say, Mr. Butchoff, that you will be disturbed by any use of the terrace. If the terminal hour was not 9 p.m. but say 7 p.m., would that make a significant difference?
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, it would do. I mean, if I eat in the evening and I have, as I say, have the luxury of a terrace, and I probably would eat out after 7 o'clock in the evening. I certainly don't eat before that. And if there was no noise, it would be much better than listening to 20 people talking. Yes, for sure.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question.
Councillor Healy?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thanks. I've got, I suppose, one question to Mr. Butchoff, and that is that video that you mentioned in your submission. What did it say? And do you remember roughly what time of the night it was?
It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was a huge melee outside. I mean, I agree that probably a lot of those people were nothing to do with the Gold. I think they'd been shifted up from somewhere else. But they did congregate outside the Gold, and they weren't moved on for whatever reason. No police, as far as I'm aware, turned up. It really was quite disconcerting, I have to say. I'm not blaming the Gold necessarily, because as far as I'm aware, it happened for 2 or 3 nights in succession, and then after that, it didn't happen again. But it was very disturbing. I mean, there were hundreds of people involved. Literally.
Well, if it was 2 in the morning, let's say, how would anybody at the premises know about it? I mean, they'd all gone home, haven't they?
No, I think people were still on the premises. It might have been 1 o'clock or 1. It might have been 1 o'clock or 1:15.
We closed.
I literally
12:30. Sorry,
sorry?
It's Nick House here. Sorry, we close at 12:30.
Right.
I think Ginger, just quickly, Ginger sitting next to me can again add some light to that group of people. It was certainly nothing to do with us.
Yeah, this was the incident that I spoke about, where with lots and lots of guests that were not belonging to the restaurant were shifted from Jinstitute up to us.
I mean, it's curious why they congregate outside your establishment when it's closed, because there's nothing to be gained from it. But I don't know.
I think it might be customers of Lunsdale, Ginstitute, all combined, to be honest.
Yeah, but why would, I'm just curious. I mean, we can only speculate, but if you're closed, why would they come down to your neck of the woods, so to speak?
I suspect it's because these other properties closed relatively earlier compared to us, and they were probably assuming that we were still open for trade.
And we weren't. Basically.
And we weren't.
Yeah, this is the point. If it was after, well, you said, I think you said 12:30.
Yeah.
This is the thing. So it's a bit odd. But anyway, clearly you can't be responsible for that. If you've shooed your own customers away after you've closed, then if people turn up, I guess it's difficult to control them, especially if nobody's there anymore, which is fair enough. You can be gone. Yeah.
Sorry, if I may just add
Yeah,
that I think they were still there at 1:15. That's the thing I probably didn't mention. They were there by 10 o'clock. So I assume that they probably were buying alcohol from the Gold, and that's why they were there in the first place. I don't know. I only took the photographs from my top terrace. So
Sorry to interrupt, Ginger here. I was working that evening, and Alex Gallup and myself decided to close the venue down because of the amount of crowds that were gathered outside the property at 10 p.m.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. My question is now to Ms. Fleming Brown, and possibly on Ms. Lambert's behalf, Fiona can answer. She felt that October 22 as a temporary date is too long. What would you suggest? That's the first question. So let's deal with that. What would you suggest, given the fact that we will only get so-called normal conditions, and I suspect there'll be a peak in June because of what I mentioned earlier about people being able to come back unrestricted, more or less, we hope. So we don't get the full summer, if you like, and then winter, of course, things do quieten down, although they're quietened down. They have heaters on the parking bay, tables and chairs, although that will expire in September this year, we're expecting extension. I suspect most premises will want to extend it. So, but anyway, in winter, things cool down, literally, and so fewer people about. So what would you suggest would be a good shorter period that still allows the testing of the amended conditions if we grant them?
I would suggest a review after 4 months, because that will have allowed full operation, God willing, of the inside of the premises, as well as the additional areas, if you do grant consent for the use of the third floor. And I think that it will draw together any problems which could then be dealt with quite swiftly.
Yes, except that 4 months, I think my point was that 4 months is really not sufficient to see what normality is, whatever that would be.
It would be sufficient to see if there's considerable nuisance, such that the situation can't be allowed to continue.
Let me see, 4 months from, I guess, from today, let's say that's 4th month, 4 months gets us to August. That's or September, which is kind of the end of the summer. Would you not? Okay, all right. You don't think that's a bit too short to allow proper testing?
Well, I would be
always going to complain. Remember, they said they're willing to listen to complaints.
I would be guided.
And if planning goes, sorry, go on.
I'd be guided by the wisdom of the licensing committee, but I do think a much more immediate review than 2022 is needed. And I think in the first instance, it should be quite proximate to the opening up of the full establishment.
Chair, just from a legal point of view, of course, we don't know what lockdown provisions will be issued and whether we go back into another lockdown. However, if you make a decision today and if you grant all or any part of it, that decision will take effect from now. So any time period would run from now. And if there are further regulations that prevent the business running, that may impact on the timing.
Or the effect of the timing, you mean? Like if we said 4 months, we wouldn't get the full 4 months value testing time because of new regulations coming out. We've had this in other cases.
It's difficult to be precise at the moment because things do change so suddenly. So it is difficult to be precise, but I know you were concerned about the 4-month period suggested.
And I would equally just add some.
I think this is my underlying.
If I could just add some comments as well. I mean, the photograph was taken this week. That is the state of the roof. There is in no way that should you grant today, it's going to be open tomorrow. There's significant amount of work, furniture, the inside needs to be done. And categorically, I would, if it was a 4-month period, I would need to be putting in the application virtually tomorrow to redo it. We do think, and it was agreed with Keith Mahaffey for that time frame, so it could be properly tested, should a further application be made.
Yes, thank you very much. The other point made was, particularly by Ms. Lambert, is her particular concern was music. She said no music on the 3rd floor. That was a concern, and sorry, that was your concern, Mr. Fleming Brown, but
shared by me.
And you put in, and yes, and then you said you were against the 3rd floor terrace.
I wanted to draw the committee's attention to the fact that we've had endless complaints about raised terraces, and including this one before the current owners took the Gold over, even though at that time it wasn't even officially in use. So they do cause real problems, and I would certainly be unhappy about music as well as voices.
Chair, can I just, it's Heidi Titcombe here. Can I just make a legal comment that, of course, music is deregulated up until 11 o'clock at night, although the applicants here are offering a condition that it will only be background music. That is, that they would, in fact, be entitled to play music under the deregulation provisions.
Thank you.
And I just need to confirm that wouldn't be the case other than background, as we've stated, to deal with that. Obviously, if anything was played, there would be complaints, and that's not something we want to do at all. We want to operate safely and quietly for everyone involved.
Also, with any luck, the planning process will have been completed, and at least for some of it, the 10 dBA, 10 decibels below ambient would be applied, so that would cover some of it. I think that covers all my questions. Anybody like to say anything?
Sorry, it's Lana Tricker here. Just a few comments that I just made. I can't remember, sorry, who said this. It was Fiona, I believe, mentioning that the 3rd, and maybe I've misinterpreted this, that the 3rd floor has already been advertised. The 3 floors that we advertise on our website is the ground, 1st and 2nd. We haven't used the 3rd floor, and we do not advertise the 3rd floor at all. And equally, the comments about the website and the comments, and if the website is actually read in full, it also states that Gold Notting Hill is a very diverse space set over 3 floors that can cater for events of all sizes, from intimate private dinings to larger receptions. So it's not in terms of garden takeovers. There has not been an event in the 2 years that it's been trading where the terrace has been taken over by one client. It's not how it's operated. Keith Mahaffey, I believe, dealt with all the noise comments to deal with that, and also just make a comment that should this be granted in any way, it's not going to create a precedent, as each application must be dealt with on the merits. And the prior statements of Nick House at the previous committee as well, certainly the global pandemic was not envisaged in any way in terms of the application being made today.
Yes, sure, thank you. Ms. Titcombe, would you like to add anything as legal officer?
Yes, sorry, Chair, I don't wish to delay you greatly, but I do feel, because of all the discussions that have taken place, that it's important just to go through that document I circulated yesterday, so that you understand what is being agreed and what is not. So if we could have that document up, that would be most helpful.
And the licensing officers and governance can comment afterwards, or would you like them to comment first? Because we're going to go through all the conditions now.
Oh, right.
And Councillor Williams would like to speak.
Well, okay. I mean, I think I'll raise it now rather than during conditions. I did have an exchange with Mr. Bischoff about the having a 1900 terminal hour for the terrace, and I would like to hear the comments of the applicant on that.
Oh, sorry, I omitted to deal with that. The terminal hour of 9 p.m. has been considered. We had quite a bit of discussion about it, and Nick can address that further. But it comes down to the sitting times and the viability of doing the business. And when I talk about viability, I appreciate that doesn't have anything to do with the licensing objectives, but in terms of the conditions that are operating, we are satisfied that we can deal with that. Nick, do you want to comment on the 7 p.m. terminal hour?
Yeah, sorry. So realistically, an early evening seating, the kind of earliest an early evening seating is 6:30. So if you're realistically to make it work as such, you're talking about well, really, I mean, 6:30, 7 o'clock is when the seating period happens. So if you apply an hour and a half, an hour 45 minutes, you feel that you can comfortably address getting people to pay up by 9 p.m. is the long and short of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Ms. Fleming Brown, you got a hand up just before we get into the conditions. Is that legacy or is that new?
No, it's new.
Go on then.
It was just to say that my comments about the suitability of the gold for garden terrace takeovers comes from their website. That's the source of it.
No,
but you need to, Fiona, sorry, you need to, the context, I think the website's talking.
I think Ms. Tricker made the context clear. I was merely quoting your website.
Because the context is the garden, be it the ground floor. So the context of the garden terrace takeovers is not referring to the third floor roof. Is that clear? I
have to accept that that's what you mean if that's what you say. I think it does present your operation in a slightly different light.
That's entirely
I thought it was significant to mention it.
And we haven't done one garden terrace takeover once in the 2 years of operation. What the website's trying to articulate is the building as such can deal with people of different numbers. So as Lana mentioned earlier, intimate groups, call it 2 people, 4 people, or larger groups. The only relevance of garden terrace takeover has no relevance of the third floor. And the floors that the website talks about doesn't reference the third floor.
Okay.
Right. Chair, as you're having difficulties with your iPad, might I suggest that you switch off and then we have a 5-minute break, so you can switch off and then switch back in before I start dealing with the conditions?
Yeah, that was Councillor Healy, I think.
Oh, well, sorry.
It doesn't matter who it is. It's one of us. It doesn't matter who it is. It's one of us. So.
Yes, so perhaps we need a 5-minute break so that Councillor Healy can reconnect.
Fine. Could I just ask whether you want licensing and governance to comment before you do this bit, or you want to wait till afterwards? I mean, the order normally is
afterwards. May I point out it's down to 7% now. It's going to fade out any minute.
I know. I accept that. I'm just asking which way you want to. Anyway, let's take the break now. Let Councillor Healy reconnect, and then we can ask.
Thank you.
Chairman, can we say that we'll start again at 1:15, please?
Yes. Thank you very much. That's right. That's very good. Right. 1:15. Let's see if Councillor Healy is back with us. Councillor Healy, well, you looked at, yeah, you're here. Excellent. Councillor Williams? Yep, okay. Ms. Titcombe?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Well, I hope everybody else is, without taking a roll call. Sorry, Councillor Williams, did you say you're here? You're muted anyway. Councillor Williams. Give him another minute.
He's listed, he's muted.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Perhaps he's not
I'm
there.
back. Hello, I'm back.
Good. Okay, good. Excellent. I think we're ready to continue. So the question was, in terms of running order, whether Ms. Titcombe would like to go through the conditions now, or have the licensing officers and governance officers the chance to comment first, or do you want them to wait till you've done the conditions?
I'm happy to leave it in your hands.
Right, because I'm just thinking maybe you let licensing officers afterwards, because they might want to comment on the conditions. So yeah, let's leave it to the end. So I mean, that's what's written in the running order anyway. So Ms. Titcombe, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'll just check in that Lana Tricker's here.
Oh yeah, good point.
Yes, I've just come back, Heidi.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Thanks. So if we could just go, I'll deal with them in order. So the first point is in relation to extending the licensed area to the 3rd floor, which includes the internal area and the terrace. Can you confirm whether that is going to be for a time limited period to the 31st of October, or whether you want the inside area to be permanent?
We would like the terrace area to be time limited and the internal to be permanent. We fully appreciate it is for the members to decide whether or not they also put a terminal time of 31st of October to 2022. Any time earlier than that is not commercially viable to my client in any way, and the time frame to get that area habitable for patrons and the works to be carried out, it's just not financially viable for any earlier time period. We also don't know what the COVID regulations will say, what's going to happen in the future. We have agreed that time limit, and we really think that that's needed so that a fair representation of trade can be put back before members at a later time should we seek to make it permanent in any way.
That's helpful, thank you. And then in terms of condition 13, is this condition to be time limited to the 31st of October?
We applied for, this is the retractable roof. Yes, we applied for it to be time limited, although I've just spoken to Nick during the break, and he's happy to forget about this part of the variation in full if that's if any help, and we can withdraw that part of the variation for the rear retractable roof, and we will just close it at 9 p.m.
Thank you.
So, well, that's helpful. So you are actually withdrawing the change to condition 13 completely?
We are, Heidi, now. I've just spoken to Nick during that break.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Sorry, people, Ms. Titcombe and Ms. Tricker, could I ask just the point about the ventilation? I presume you'll have a decent ventilation system in place if it isn't there already.
Of course, we have. If this is going to cause disturbance to the residents and they're adamant it's going to cause noise, we will keep the existing condition.
That's helpful. Thank you very much, Lana. In terms of condition 18, so this is this amalgamates the condition 19 as well. and it relates to all 3 floors. Is this going to be time limited?
Heidi, I said no, as I thought it made sense to allow that, but we're happy for that to be time limited now. And the point that you raise about the emergency or any essential maintenance, we don't need that. If members feel they don't want to allow that exception, we're not going to fight about that.
So you're happy for it to be time limited if members feel that's appropriate?
Can I just comment really quickly, Lana, on this particular point? The reason why that we sought additional flexibility there, there was a few occasions where an extreme heat wave hit London, and for literally a period of 5-6 days, air conditioning systems can't cope. So you can have the air conditioning system on full and the air conditioning system cannot cope with like heat waves that we've experienced in particular last year. So it certainly felt that we would get additional flexibility to operate an environment that people didn't feel entirely claustrophobic and were melting in.
Sorry, is this condition 18 you're referring to?
It's the window. I think it's the windows.
I think Nick was just talking about the reason behind why this change was sought.
Permanent. Yeah, the reason that sorry, I was just trying to explain my theory on why we sought it as a permanent alteration.
Yes. Yeah, so you sought it as a permanent alteration. But if the members are minded that they would be prepared to grant it, but only on a time limited, you'd be happy with that. But it still you still want the members to decide whether to grant number 18 permanently.
I certainly feel it should. I would certainly strongly prefer it being a permanent, give us some permanent flexibility. Again, for the reasons that I stated, these windows, well, they don't cause a nuisance. For the very, very rare occasion that there's a heat wave, these like we suffered in 2019 and 2020, the air conditioning system couldn't cope.
That's understood, and the members will certainly take that into account. I'm just making sure they have all the facts before them.
Understood, Heidi.
Yep. Okay.
Make a point here. Just make a point or ask a question about this here, Ms. Tidcombe, or indeed the applicant. This is a very interesting point about heat waves, because the predictions are that our climate is going to get warmer for the next few years anyway. So the question then arises, which is not the subject of this, but it's a question about the air conditioning system. Mr. House said it may not cope, and it could not cope when he had it before. They will have to be recalibrated to cope.
That's a fair point. I think when you speak to most mechanical companies that build out restaurants, spas in the UK, they build them to a certain grade, and that there was certainly the answers. There was certainly the answer we got from our mechanical company in terms of how can we make this cope better during a heat wave where it's 45 degrees, and in truth, I think every single restaurant and bar suffered because every single air conditioning system wasn't coping with the very rare kind of extreme heat wave we suffered.
So I can imagine that, but we have restaurants well, I'll take the example which I find really extreme, which is what I experienced in the Gulf places, one or two Gulf countries, where it's always hot. It always gets to 45 and 50 degrees in summer, and it's over cold. I mean, it's freezing in them. But the point is that there's experience, which is totally environmentally unfriendly in my view. But that's another point. The thing is, though, that there are plenty of establishments around the world, whether they're in India or Kuwait or Florida, that deal with much warmer temperatures on a regular basis. So air conditioning systems are around. It's just a question of specifying it.
Totally agree, and that may well be the case that we have to change the specification.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, okay, so that's that really hinges on your condition 19, which at the moment requires the first and second floors for the windows to be closed all the time, and you want that restriction to be removed for the upper floors so that you then start closing windows at 9 o'clock. I understand that. Thank you very much. Then condition 20, is this one to be time limited?
We're going to leave that to members to decide. We've been operating through to 10 p.m. Currently on 10s, etc. And we've heard about the practices at the venue already, but we'll leave that to members.
Right.
And that applies, Heidi, to 4, 5, and 6 on 4, 5, and 6 of the variation on your document. They're all the same.
Right, that's helpful.
Could I just remark here that the adaptation or whatever to the tables and chairs outside the pavement license, I think is not very. It's a bit tenuous because that's a temporary thing brought under temporary regulations or special regulation for the pandemic. So I wouldn't have to put so much weight on that as one might think.
Right, okay. So then you've obviously, as you're asking for the third floor to be licensed, you want to remove condition 47, and you've suggested amending condition 47. Is condition 47 to be time limited?
For the terrace, as I said, yes. So if you go, I agree with everything. Oh, on point A, Heidi, you've got from X hours each day in square brackets. We are happy for the condition to be ancillary to substantial table meal, full stop. We're not seeking to just have drinks up there.
Yeah, so that's always, so I can delete that. So this is, so are you referring to just all areas or just the terrace?
That was for A related to the entire third floor.
Entire third floor.
Yep, will be alcohol ancillary to food. And then you go to B, all activities on the third floor shall cease. So we would say all licensable activities on the outside terrace on the third floor shall cease.
So can I just be clear what terminal hour for the outside terrace is being offered now? Is it 21:30 or did you agree 2100?
2100 is fine. The 21:30 in terms of getting people out off the terrace, I understand came from confirmation Keith Mahaffey had and the conversation through there. We applied for 9 p.m. and we're happy with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
So that basically means that customers won't need to leave until 9:30. So that's when they'll be leaving the terrace.
So my interpretation was that there would be no customers on the terrace after 2100.
No, the way the applicants phrased the conditions relating to the third floor was they're referring to licensable activities, i.e. drinking alcohol. And they wanted to have 30 minutes after that for to allow the guests to leave.
No, sorry, Heidi, I think we're at cross purposes. When I'd originally applied, it was to 2100, and that was for people to leave the terrace at that time as well. When we had a meeting with Keith Mahaffey, or when Nick had a meeting with Keith Mahaffey, he was after some confirmation of everyone leaving the terrace. So he's, as I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, everyone off the terrace by 21:30. We are happy just to revert back to our original wording if that's going to cause a problem, the extra 30 minutes, and everyone will have left the terrace by 2100. So you could amend B, Heidi, to read all licensable activities shall have left the third. Yeah, well, you've got it there. Shall cease, and all persons shall have left the third floor, but the third floor terrace by 2100 hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lani, you are correct.
You're happy with that amendment?
I am.
We are happy with that amendment.
Okay. And what about smokers? Are you happy with that?
C, Nick, do you have any comment? I understood you were, but can you just confirm that point C?
So I'm just reading it now. No sofa patron should be permitted to smoke on the third floor of terrace. Yeah, it sounds totally reasonable.
Yes, Heidi.
Thank you. And then D.
So this is one that we discussed in terms of limiting, I think it was the conversation with Keith. So at the end, so it will read, the maximum capacity on the third floor, including the terrace, shall be limited to 20 persons at all times, with no more than 15 persons on the terrace, on the third floor terrace.
Yes, that was discussed. You agreed, yes. They offered.
If I'm just thinking, if you want the internal area to be permanent, I don't know whether the members are going to agree or not, then we still need a condition in relation to the smokers outside to make it clear that smokers are not allowed out there.
Absolutely, but doesn't C cover that? Because we're just saying there's zero activity on the terrace after 2100.
Yeah, but my understanding is this whole condition, you want time limited. Or have I misunderstood that?
You've misunderstood that in the sense of, oh, hang on. No, it doesn't say that. So I think you just need a condition saying that the third floor terrace will be time limited to 31st of October 2022.
Yes, I understand that, but in terms of the restrictions on the that will bite the inside, so we don't want smokers. If you get permanent inside, I want to make sure that you then can't have your staff outside smoking.
Yes, if you want to add that as a separate condition.
Separate condition, yeah.
I have no objection to that if should the internal area be made permanent.
Okay.
So that's now a separate condition, new separate condition stating that there will be no smoking on the terrace under any circumstances after 2100.
Correct.
Yes, and that will be a standalone separate one. Thank you.
Okay.
It's because there's the split between the two areas. That's why, and the timing. So that's why I need to be clear. And then all music played on the third floor shall be limited to background music only. And that, again, will have to be permanent, won't it?
Agreed. Yep.
Could I just mention this, that the objections, let me rephrase that, sorry. Would you, that's the applicant, would you accept no music on the third floor? Or audible outside, put it like that. No music that's audible outside on the third floor, because that was raised by the objectors.
I believe that there's already a permanent condition on the existing license that deals with, I'm just trying to find the license, that we won't cause any nuisance or anything like that. I'm just trying to find the license to give you the condition number.
Okay.
Sir, could I just come in?
Mr. Mahaffey, go ahead. I saw that.
Audibility is not a reasonable concept in law, because it's been what the criteria here is public nuisance. It's the fact that you can hear some music, but it will not be at a level that will give rise to public nuisance. And I would prefer not to use the word inaudible in any condition, because it's unenforceable.
And just in terms of the condition, we have on our existing license condition 8, which is at page 13, that says the premises license holder shall ensure that no music shall be played within the premises so as to give rise to nuisance within neighbouring dwellings.
Yeah, but it is vague. So if you get one complaint about music emanating from the third floor, will you take action and shut it down? I mean, this is the problem. It's a good idea, but
I mean, I would be willing to even set the limiter at a level that Keith thinks is appropriate. I mean, I have no intention to annoy people with music, absolutely none. But equally, when customers sit in an environment, I think you can hear if you can hear, I don't know, the person sitting next to you that you don't want to hear their conversation. I don't know. It's just it's a balance of just being entirely. It's a balance of a customer experience.
But you heard Mr. Butchoff and Ms. Fleming Brown and also Ms. Lambert specifically refer to. I mean, it also been to voices, but it's also music on the third floor.
I mean, there's in terms of music.
Deregulated, you said.
Part of it is going to be time limited, but I think E and F should be permanent.
Yeah.
And I also think you could add a condition saying that no music shall be played on the terrace of the third floor, which is also permanent. What's your views on that, Lana?
I have no objection to making E and F permanent to deal with that. And I certainly don't believe it's Nick's intention to be playing music or have any speakers or anything like that on the terrace area. Is that correct, Nick? Yeah. Apologies for our conversation because we're not in the same room together.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. That's helpful. So this whole condition would need to be amended because obviously certain aspects. This is if the members are minded to go along with the permanence and the time limited aspects, then this whole condition would need to be tweaked to make sure that I'm capturing the right bits for the permanent and the temporary.
Yes, and are we talking about music limited to 2100 or no music at all on the third floor terrace?
Well, I think they just said that there was no music to be played at all on the third floor terrace.
Fine, that would be very good, of course.
Okay.
Can the applicant confirm that?
Yes, that's what Nick said.
Thank you very much. Just for the record.
Thank you. And then we go to the consumption of alcohol, which is just a tweak, really.
I have no objection to that.
And that's permanent, isn't it?
Yes, condition 22 was permanent. And I think the only, just for Nick's benefit, the only change was the consumption point, but you had to close anyway, and we weren't consuming after that in any event.
Yes, and then the condition that's not agreed is number 2, which is the liaison meeting. And if the members are minded to do something, you'd rather it be 6 monthly rather than a quarterly.
Correct. And as I've said before, I think I've dealt with that after the last break, was we will do under our management policy meetings 6 monthly with residents.
Yeah.
And will you take minutes would you follow the rest of it, like taking minutes and circulating them to the parties mentioned in proposed condition 2 there?
Nick, are you happy to do that?
Sure. Sounds
yes.
Because then we have a record, then we have a public record of it happening, which is just about as good as a condition, I would suppose, at this stage.
Yes, and we will liaise with Keith in relation to attendees or invites about that as well, and we'll take the lead on these meetings from Keith.
Right, because I think that the point you're making is that a fixed date is also difficult, or perhaps onerous, let's call it that. Then if you have it in your management plan, you obviously have a bit more flexibility in handling that. So that sounds like a plan. And Mr. Mahaffey would like to comment. Mr. Mahaffey?
Yes, there is one condition which we didn't discuss, that's not on the list that I discussed, was having the French doors opening onto the terrace at the third floor kept closed at 9 p.m.
Oh, no problem with that.
That's fine.
So can you just repeat that, Keith?
I said the condition which we agreed earlier was that the doors opening onto the terrace on third floor level shall be kept closed after 9 p.m.
And that shall be permanent.
Permanent.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's agreed. Sorry, I was just taking a note there. That was why you hadn't heard from me. So that's all the conditions I had in mind, unless any members or anyone else had any other conditions they wanted to discuss.
Councillor Williams?
No.
Councillor Healy?
No, thank you.
And I don't have anything to add either.
Thank you.
Right, so thank you very much. Could we ask our licensing officers if they wish to add anything? Mr. Phelan or somebody?
Nothing further from me, Chair. Thank you.
Anybody from governance?
No, thank you, Chairman. No questions from us.
Well, it looks like we have reached the end of this meeting. We do have all the information needed and we'll retire to make our decision in private session. I would like to say here again, which I think I said earlier in one way or another, and I like to say at other meetings, is we do very much want to support our businesses and we want them to come back roaring, as it were, after these restrictions. And you know, we support businesses and we have a lead member whose portfolio it is to support businesses. And but we also have to balance these needs with our residents. And as the statement of licensing policy says in more than one paragraph, in fact, just about all of our borough is residential. Even apparently busy streets like Notting Hill Gate, which is closer to me, and I'm not so familiar with the others, but I'm sure High Street Kensington, for example, is no different. All very residential with homes on the main streets, facing shops, facing venues. So we do have to balance the needs of the residents and the needs of business. And we do try our best for both parties, if I may put it that. Although you heard, there's a lot of support, even from the objectors, there's support for these premises, and that's often the case. We welcome the premises, we want them to succeed, but there are some issues which we can control. So
finish. Could I ring you back in 2 minutes? No, so everything's on mute.
Keith, your microphone's on.
Thank you. I just wanted to stress that so that nobody gets the wrong impression that we are trying to, everything strongly one way or the other. It is a problem. And of course, Portobello Road is a particularly narrow street. And it's been said several times about the echoey possibilities in there. And I know how easy it is for crowds to collect there. Anyway, as I said, we'll not announce the decision today. Instead, the hearing on this application will be closed and the live broadcast will end. A summary of this decision will be sent to the parties within 5 working days of today's hearing, and a full decision will follow as soon as possible thereafter, but there's no guarantee it's the week after. Thank you all for attending, and the hearing is now closed.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.